Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Ellie Nesler. In the small town of Jamestown, California, Daniel Mark Driver was on trial for child abuse. One of Daniel's victims was William Nesler, a defenseless child. William's mother, Ellie, felt that the justice system had failed to protect her son, so Ellie took matters into her own hands with a gun. The case sparked widespread debate, with some people fully supporting Ellie, while others criticized her actions. Ultimately, the discussion surrounding the case attracted national attention. Jamestown was a small, quiet town with a population of about 3,500 at the time of the incident. Ellie was the eldest of 3 daughters. Her parents were hardworking miners who taught Ellie the importance of self-reliance from a young age. As a result, she grew up to be strong and independent. During her teenage years, Ellie began to help her family by looking for work. It was a tough economic time. She took on various jobs to supplement her income. She also helped her parents by taking care of her younger siblings. When Ellie turned 20, she fell in love with a guy she met, and they quickly entered a romantic relationship. Soon after, they got married, but their marriage ended in divorce shortly thereafter. Her next partner was Bill, who worked as a miner. Additionally, Bill operated construction equipment, allowing him to earn a good income. They married in 1982 and soon welcomed a son named William. Bill grew up in an area that was once the center of the gold rush. As a child, he had listened to stories of old men panning for gold in the river, which inspired him to seek their adventure, even though the land was largely depleted by then. In search of better fortune, Bill and his family traveled to Liberia, West Africa, during the gold rush. While Bill was prospecting for gold, Ellie gave birth to their daughter, Rebecca. Unfortunately, Rebecca's early years were not peaceful. Suddenly, shortly after her birth, civil war broke out in Liberia. As a result, Ellie and the children returned to Jamestown, while Bill remained in West Africa, determined to make his fortune mining gold. During this time, Ellie faced numerous challenges in the United States. She received no support from Bill, and although she was a strong and independent woman, managing a household and caring for 2 young children proved to be very difficult for her. They relied on government assistance and occasional jobs that Ellie managed to find. During this period, she received support from her family and the church, which she attended regularly with her children and sister. Her mother often advised her to be self-reliant but also to carry a gun in her handbag for protection. Ellie took this lesson to heart. Despite her delicate appearance, she was always prepared to defend herself and, if needed, to take the initiative in a confrontation. This aspect of her character would later lead to tragic consequences. Ellie is very close to her children and does not let them go far. This protectiveness stems from her own traumatic experience as a child, when she was molested by an adult man. After she confided in her mother reacted violently and threatened him to leave town. This incident left Ellie with lasting psychological scars that she has struggled with throughout her life. She fears that her children may face similar dangers. When her son William went to summer camp away from home, she felt very anxious and scared. Despite her worries, William kept asking his mother to let him go to the summer camp organized by the church. Ellie was very anxious about letting her son spend time with others without her supervision. She hadn't even allowed him to sleep over at friends' houses. Eventually, her sister Jenna reassured her, explaining that she knew the camp organizers well and described them as respectable and good people. After thinking it over, Ellie finally agreed to let her son go, hoping he would enjoy himself. William spent 3 weeks at a church-run tent camp. After returning from the summer camp, Ellie noticed a change in William's behavior. William became aggressive, often sad, and stopped communicating. Ellie sensed that something was bothering him. Despite her and her family's efforts to find out what was happening at the camp, William refused to discuss it with adults. He insisted on being treated like an adult and wanted them to stop asking him questions. Younger sister Rebecca and his mother thought he was trying to imitate the older teenagers he had met at the camp. When the new school year started a few weeks later, everyone thought William was settling in well with his friends. However, when he returned to class, things did not improve. He began to withdraw from his family and became more aggressive with his classmates, rarely interacting with others. His anger often became uncontrollable, and these incidents had increased since he had been at the camp. Ellie was confused by William's changes, and it took her over a year to discover the reason behind them. Unfortunately, the truth behind it was quite heartbreaking. Daniel Mark Driver, a 30-year-old man who attended the same church as Ellie and her children, had recently moved in with his mother, who lived nearby. He was considered a good man and an active member of the church, known for his community involvement and willingness to help other parishioners. He always carried a Bible with him and could easily recite passages from it. Daniel took on the role of kitchen staff at the summer camp and also helped supervise the children, who always spoke positively of him. He is a natural psychologist. According to his parents, Daniel can help solve any difficult situation. Students often come to him to confide in him when they are in trouble. Many boys who do not have fathers consider Daniel as a father figure. With his persuasive skills, he can talk to any teenager. William experienced a significant change in his relationship with Daniel. William used to enjoy spending time with Daniel and interacting with him. But after returning from summer camp, William became noticeably anxious even during casual encounters. During this time, William often argued with his sister Rebecca, seemingly starting conflicts for no reason, and William also began to defy his mother. He had never argued with Ellie before, but now he became increasingly defiant. Occasionally, William's Aunt Jen, who was very close to the family, would take William to her home for the weekend. This gave his mother a break. About 9 months after the camp, Jen took William to her home for a weekend. During his stay, he had the opportunity to spend time with his cousins. Each time, Jen tried to discuss the major changes in his behavior, but William was quiet and avoided answering her questions. However, he later confided in her a secret, insisting that she not tell anyone, not even his mother. Jen agreed to keep it a secret. 7-year-old William shared his experience while he was at summer camp. Daniel began to behave inappropriately towards him. One day, the Daniel lured William into the woods with the promise of showing him frogs and other animals. However, as they went deeper into the woods, the Daniel began to abuse him. This abuse continued regularly, even after the summer camp ended. The boy was afraid to go to church and tried to avoid the Daniel as much as possible. The abuse began when William was 6 years old, and during this time, the Daniel threatened him, saying that he would harm William and his family if he revealed what was happening. Fearing danger to his loved ones, William kept quiet, and the abuse continued for many months. After hearing the story, Jen felt she had to talk to Ellie. She apologized to William for revealing his secret, but felt the need to take action against the rapist and put an end to his actions. Jen first spoke to her sister Ellie about what had happened to William. Ellie was shocked and blamed herself for exposing her child to such a problem. From the beginning, her maternal instincts warned her that William should not attend the camp. However, she succumbed to the pressure, leading to the outcome she feared and experienced. William worried that the man might come back and act on his threat if he found out that William had told anyone about the incident. The boy became increasingly anxious and fearful. He often came home from school in tears, telling his mother that he had seen Daniel's car in the distance. The panic attacks became more frequent, and he began to feel paranoid. He tried his best to cope, but the situation was still not good. Ellie then reported the molestation involving their son to the police. Police checked Daniel's record in a national database, discovering a worrying history of crimes involving children. In 1984, he was charged with indecent exposure to 5 boys in the San Jose area. Although he was arrested, his church community sent letters of support to him before the trial. With no solid evidence other than the boys' testimony, the judge ultimately decided to give Daniel probation instead of a prison sentence, allowing him to escape the consequences of his actions. This leniency allowed him to continue his harmful actions. Daniel then decided to move away and start over. He moved closer to his mother, where no one knew about his past crimes. Daniel also started attending church and developed a healthy relationship with a woman who had a young son. He became more involved with the children, working with them, giving them advice, and eventually got a job at a church summer camp, where he was often around children. However, the woman began to notice Daniel's unusual behavior towards her child and started to pay closer attention. She eventually asked her son if Daniel had ever bothered him, but the boy appeared confused and insisted that nothing inappropriate had happened. The mother, doubting her son's honesty and fearing he was too scared to speak up, did not dismiss her concerns. She continued to monitor Daniel's behavior. A few months later, she caught Daniel molesting her son. She then contacted a friend who was the district attorney. A background check revealed that Daniel had served 5 months in 1983 for child abuse. Concerns about him grew when William's case occurred, prompting the boy's mother, Ellie, to contact the police. At that point, the police investigated Daniel more closely and gathered evidence from new victims of his molestation. After Ellie reported the incident, the police stepped up their efforts to prevent similar crimes by Daniel. Police began questioning all the families who had come into contact with Daniel, including children who had attended the camp. Many of them reported similar experiences, which helped police understand the tactics Daniel used. He repeatedly targeted boys, gaining their trust while threatening to kill them and their families if they spoke out, which proved effective. Police identified 5 new victims in the area, including William. In 1983, charges were filed, but they were unable to arrest Daniel because he had been out of town for an extended period of time. At the time, it was difficult to track his whereabouts due to the lack of cell phones, GPS, and other tracking technology. Police suspected that he had learned of the investigation and had gone into hiding. Both Daniel and his car were placed on the wanted list, and his photo was widely circulated in the press. However, despite these efforts, it took several years to find him. Meanwhile, William's depression and aggressive behavior continued. He frequently got into fights at school, did poorly in school, and became a bully. As a result, William was expelled from several schools and transferred several times. Ellie believes her son's behavior stems from past violence that has deeply affected him. She sought help for her son, taking him to numerous doctors and psychologists in hopes of improving his situation, but nothing seemed to work. In 1993, police finally caught up with Daniel at a store in Palo Alto, California, for shoplifting. After confessing to the theft, Daniel faced charges not only for shoplifting but also for child abuse. Even after Daniel was arrested and awaiting trial, William continued to feel afraid. He struggled to accept that he would have to face his abuser in court. William would have to testify against him, but the thought of it filled him with dread. William was so anxious that the mere mention of the trial made him feel sick. In desperation, Ellie approached the prosecutor to request special arrangements for her son's testimony. She hoped William could testify without Daniel present to spare him serious emotional distress. Unfortunately, the current rules required William to appear before a jury. To address this situation, the only solution was to install cameras so that William could provide testimony from another room. He would be recorded, and the video would be shown in court. Unfortunately, the small community lacked the funds to set this up. As a result, William had to appear in court like the other boys who had also been victimized by the Daniel. The trial was challenging due to the presence of many emotionally and physically traumatized children. The boys who had already testified had experienced significant distress, but they managed to get through it. On April 2, 1993, 11-year-old William was one of the last witnesses to take the stand. Ellie tried to prepare him for his meeting with Daniel the criminal as best she could. However, when the car carrying William and his relatives arrived at the courthouse, William did not want to leave. He began to have a panic attack and vomited violently. Ellie reassured him that he needed to testify because testifying was the only way to ensure that a dangerous person would be locked up and unable to harm anyone else. William understood the importance of his testimony, but his fear made it difficult for him to calm down. Ellie, William, and the aunts waited outside the courthouse to be called to testify. During this time, they tried to comfort William and help him calm down. Suddenly, a van arrived at the courthouse and Daniel was taken out. When William saw Daniel, he felt nauseous again. Ellie stared at Daniel as he walked through the courthouse yard. She later remembered that Daniel just smirked and walked past. She felt a burning hatred for this man. As they left the building, Daniel's ex-girlfriend and her son, who was also a victim, testified against him. The woman told Ellie that things were not going well. She noted that the children were nervous and confused in their testimony. Daniel took advantage of this by highlighting inconsistencies in their testimony. He continued to put the children in difficult situations, asking distressing questions that only made them more confused. They became increasingly upset, some of them crying. This makes Ellie worried about William. Ellie fears that the situation could affect the trial, potentially allowing a dangerous criminal to escape justice and return to his former criminal ways. At that moment, Ellie Nesler suddenly realizes that she must serve justice, and Daniel must be stopped forever. Court in this county lack modern security features like metal detectors. It is easy to carry guns inside. And many people in the community, including Jen, carry weapons for self-defense. While on the street, Ellie reached into her purse and quietly pulled out a gun. She hid the weapon as they entered the courtroom, where Ellie shot Daniel 6 times. 5 of the bullets hit him in the back of the head and neck, killing him instantly. People in the courtroom panicked and fled, and police rushed in with loaded guns. Jen stepped in front of her sister, causing Ellie to throw the gun to the ground and raise her hands in surrender. She was then arrested. The shocking story of a mother staging a lynching during a court hearing quickly made national headlines. Within a week, every major media outlet had covered the incident, sparking widespread debate about the lynching. Many saw Ellie as a hero, receiving overwhelming support from local residents, especially those affected by the event. 2 local banks even set up defense funds that the community could contribute to for Ellie, leading to a rush of donations from her supporters. Items such as T-shirts that read "Good shot, Ellie" became popular and which sold well. Similar stickers could be found on cars all over the country. Despite this, Ellie couldn't be celebrated as a national hero for her actions. She was arrested and had a bail set at $500,000. This amount was provided by a guarantor from Seaman, allowing her to return home before the hearings and await trial in her own community. However, not everyone agreed with her decision, and she faced criticism from some members of society who accused her of taking the law into her own hands. Still, the majority, including the local community, viewed her as a protector of her child. Police uncovered additional details about Ellie's situation. They found that she had been under the influence of illegal drugs when she fired her weapon in the courthouse. Ellie claimed she used these substances to give herself the courage needed to endure the stressful courtroom hearings. In October 1993, she received a diagnosis of breast cancer, with doctors estimating she only had 5 years to live. Initially found guilty of manslaughter, Ellie was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, her conviction was later overturned due to the jury's misconduct. She then reached a plea deal with the prosecution, admitting guilt to manslaughter, and ultimately served 3 years in prison before her release. William then moved in with his Aunt Jen. After 2 years, he was finally able to communicate with Ellie, who was still serving her sentence in prison. Ellie expressed her feelings. She deeply regretted having to take someone's life, which was never her intention. However, she felt that the justice system would not be able to protect her son and other children from a dangerous criminal. The only reason she pulled the trigger was the fear that Daniel would be released again. William's life was ruined at a key moment in his growing up. He was molested and then dragged through the courts. William became a hooligan, got involved with bad company, and lost his way. As a result, he had frequent encounters with the law, with courts and prison becoming a regular part of his life. He was first charged with a crime at the age of 14. He was incarcerated 18 times between 1999 and 2004 for various crimes. His criminal record was extensive, including charges of robbery, assault, illegal possession of a weapon, and drug-related offenses. In 2004, when he turned 23, William was living freely, had several tattoos, and resided in his family's house. He didn't have a permanent job, so, similar to his mother in her younger days, he was searching for temporary work for short periods. However, while Ellie had to do this out of necessity due to the economic crisis, for William, it was a result of his involvement in criminal activities. In 2004, he also took a part-time job with his friend David, helping to clean his house during construction and repairs. David had become disabled from working in the oil fields. In June, a dispute arose when tools went missing from the construction site, with both sides blaming each other. When the police arrived, William attacked David and beat him. Due to this incident, along with the previous charges, he was sentenced to 60 days in prison but was released after only 30 days. On July 26, 2004, just an hour after his release, he returned to his workplace. David attempted to escape but was unable to due to his disability. William then attacked David, kicking him in the head several times. As a result, David lost consciousness and died in hospital the following day. William fled the scene but was arrested a few days later and charged with first-degree murder. In June 2005, William Nesler was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Rebecca was the only one to escape the tragic fate and now lives a normal life with her family and children, often reflecting on the absence of her mother and brother during important moments. She deeply misses her brother William, who always looked out for her. Rebecca believes that William would not have ended up in prison if their mother had not shot Daniel. This tragic event caused a series of unfortunate events that made their lives worse. Despite this, she does not resent her mother. She understands that her mother was confused and made a hasty decision. In the end, Rebecca feels that her mother's actions prevented many boys from facing the same fate. Ellie's life ended in tragedy. In addition to battling breast cancer, she faced legal troubles. She became involved in distributing illegal drugs. In 2002, she bought materials for making drugs from a police informant. Initially, Ellie provided some drugs to the informant, but 5 days later, when she returned to collect the pills, she was arrested after the informant reported her. Ellie confessed to her crimes and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, but she only served 4 years. She was released in 2006, but sadly, Ellie Nesler passed away from breast cancer on December 26, 2008, at the age of 56. When Ellie died, William asked to be released from prison to say goodbye to his mother. But his request was denied. 2 years later, in 2010, Rebecca and a reporter visited her brother in prison. They spoke for about 2.5 hours. During the conversation, William was very reflective, reviewing everything that had happened in his life. He did not try to justify his actions or blame anyone else. He noted that he felt he had been pushed down a path of self-destruction at the age of 6, a burden he would always carry. William emphasized how public opinion affected him, especially when the case of Daniel, a rapist who was murdered in court, was heavily covered by the media. The attention affected him. The whole community knew that William was also a victim, sexually abused at the age of 6. People discussed his past, which made him feel ashamed. He doesn't want this attention, but it's hard for him to escape it. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Tracy Hallett and J.B. Beasley. J.B. Beasley was born on July 31, 1981, in Troy, Alabama, to Cheryl and Hilton Lanier J.B. After her parents divorced in 1984, J.B. moved to Dothan with her mother. Her mother later married Joey Begun, who became J.B.'s loving stepfather, and she and her 4 sisters grew up in a house in Dothan. She was an outgoing girl who enjoyed a variety of activities, including cheerleading, dance lessons, playing the piano, and swimming. J.B. and her sisters also modeled for several companies. During high school, she met Tracy Hallett, with whom she quickly formed a close friendship. Tracy was born on March 3, 1982, to Carolyn and Robert Hallett, a police officer with the Dothan Police Department. Her life took a dramatic turn when her father died when Tracy was 5 years old. Her mother then married Mike Roberts, who raised Tracy with her mother. Unlike her friend J.B., Tracy was shy but always put others before herself. As the eldest in the family, she took her responsibilities very seriously, especially when it came to her 2 younger brothers. Tracy attended Northview High School, excelling in her studies and participating in extracurricular activities as a cheerleader, often with J.B. As the 2 girls began to enter adulthood, they had no idea of the tragic fate that awaited them. On July 31, 1999, J.B. and Tracy set off from Dothan in J.B.'s 1993 Mazda 929 to attend a birthday party in Headland, a town just a few miles north. However, unfamiliar with the roads, the 2 young women soon found themselves in trouble. Just minutes after starting their journey from home, they became lost. At approximately 10:30 p.m., J.B. and Tracy stopped at a BP gas station in Headland to ask for directions. The gas station was located near the intersection of routes 173 and 431. Using the pay phone at the gas station, they called their friends to get a better idea of how to get to the party. However, after driving on, J.B. and Tracy found themselves in Ozark, Alabama, about 24 miles northwest of Headland, instead of their intended destination. Still confused about the directions, the girls stopped at the Big Little store at 11:30 p.m. Although the store was closed, they used the pay phone to make another call. This time, Tracy called her mother to tell them they were lost, in Ozark, and planning to return home. A woman, Marilyn Merritt, and her daughters then stopped at a gas station to buy a soda. Tracy and J.B. approached them and asked for directions to Dothan. Marilyn explained the route as best she could, and the girls seemed to understand. She found the girls polite and well-mannered and noted that their car was clean. Marilyn recalled that the girls left the parking lot and turned right, as she had instructed. However, at that time, J.B. and Tracy had not returned home. The next morning, August 1, 1999, around 8 a.m., Tracy's mother contacted the police to report her daughter missing. Police soon discovered their first clue regarding the girl's disappearance. After Tracy was reported missing, police found J.B.'s car on Herring Avenue in Ozark. What was unusual about the discovery was that the car's gas tank, which had been full the day before, was now nearly empty. The car showed signs of having been driven in muddy conditions, but the doors had been locked, although the driver's side window was partially rolled down. There was no evidence of forced entry. Inside, police found JB's driver's license on the dashboard, as well as the girls' wallets, which still contained cash. However, the car keys were missing, and neither Tracy nor JB were found. A fingerprint on the locked trunk lid led police to believe something was seriously wrong. As they surveyed the scene, they suspected the trunk might contain vital clues but were hampered by the lack of a key. However, after 6 hours of investigation, they found an interior latch that allowed them to open the trunk without a key. When police opened the trunk, they made a horrifying discovery: the bodies of 2 girls inside. Both victims were fully clothed, but their pants were soiled from the waist down. Each had been shot once in the head. An autopsy revealed that Tracy had been shot in the temple, while JB had been shot in the right cheek. Tracy's body also showed a 9mm shell casing in her leg, scratches on her arm, and spikes stuck in her jeans. JB's clothes, especially her new shoes, were muddy and dirty. Police discovered that the 2 girls had likely been shot inside the trunk, although initial signs suggested an execution-style killing. After notifying their families of the discovery, an official murder investigation was launched. Police found the girls' wallets, jewelry, money, and credit cards still in the car, indicating that this was not a robbery. Autopsies revealed no alcohol or drugs in the victims' systems. Additionally, the autopsies confirmed that neither girl had been sexually assaulted before her death, ruling out a sexual motive. 2 months after Tracy and JB's murders, the State Crime Lab released a report revealing the presence of unidentified semen on JB's clothing and skin. Despite this new evidence, the fingerprints found on the trunk lid remained a mystery, as there was no match in the database. With no clear leads, the investigation stalled. As news of the girls' deaths spread rapidly, police still had few leads to identify a suspect. A reward was also offered to try to gather information related to the murders, but no new leads were discovered. However, police soon received an unexpected breakthrough in the case. A month after the discovery of JB and Tracy's bodies, Johnny William Barentine, 28, a longtime resident of Ozark, came forward to the local police department on September 1st. Johnny claimed to have witnessed the girls' murders. He testified that on the night of the murders, he had gone out to buy milk for his 2-year-old son around the time Tracy called from the Big Little Store pay phone. At 1 a.m., Johnny returned home visibly upset and initially told his wife that he had been hit by a black truck near Herring Road. However, during a 4-hour interview with Ozark police, Johnny gave 6 different accounts of what he knew. He initially told Ozark Police Chief Tony R. Spivey that he saw a black truck speeding away from the area where the girls' bodies were discovered. Unfortunately, his story continued to change and contradict throughout the interviews. Johnny initially claimed that he picked up a tattooed stranger and drove to the Big Little Store. He later said that the stranger got into a car with 2 girls, whom he recognized as the 2 girls who were later found dead. Johnny said that the group drove to Herring Avenue, where the stranger forced the girls out of the car, leading to a struggle as the girls tried to escape. According to Johnny's statement, after witnessing a confrontation, he saw something in the stranger's hand just before hearing 2 gunshots. Johnny then drove the stranger away from the scene before returning home. However, in a conflicting version of events, Johnny admitted to police that he actually knew the stranger he picked up, identifying him as a neighbor who lived nearby. Notably, Johnny's home was less than a mile from where police discovered the victims' bodies. Johnny's story was not convincing to police, and he became the prime suspect in the murders of JB and Tracy. As a result, Ozark police quickly arrested him and charged him with 2 counts of attempted murder. However, several issues with his testimony raised suspicions. Notably, Johnny did not mention any sexual activity that would explain the presence of semen on JB's clothes and body. Additionally, the neighbor he accused had a solid alibi for the time. Johnny initially confessed to making up the entire story to collect the reward money. Despite his admission, the police believed they had the right suspect. At a preliminary hearing on September 21, Alabama Bureau of Investigation Special Agent Charles Huggins testified that Johnny accurately described the victim's clothing and other relevant details, indicating that he was indeed present at the crime scene. Then, at a bail hearing on October 18, Johnny gave another testimony. He proclaimed his innocence, saying that he never picked up a man with a tattoo or witnessed anything on the night of the murder. According to Johnny, he went to the store around 11 p.m. to buy milk for his son and then made up the story to get a reward. The judge denied him bail and he was sent back to the Dale County Jail in Ozark. Throughout this time, Johnny's family members remained supportive of him. They gave interviews to the media, expressing their belief in his innocence and stating that he was incapable of harming anyone. Johnny's attorney, Bill Kimmons, argued that his client had no involvement in the murders of Tracy and J.B., emphasizing that the 4-hour interrogation had affected Johnny, who was trapped in his own false confession. Johnny's defense also pointed out that he had only completed 7th grade and part of 8th grade. He said his client was in special education, suggesting he was incapable of planning the heinous crime. After further investigation, it was discovered that Johnny's DNA did not match the semen found on the victim's body and clothing. As a result, he was released from prison on December 17, 1999. In January 2000, a Dale County grand jury chose not to indict Johnny, officially clearing him of any suspects in the murders of Tracy and J.B. This development led to a setback in the investigation, with criticism directed at the police methods used and doubts raised about the Ozark Police's ability to handle the case. However, police continued to focus on other potential suspects. During the investigation, a man from Michigan was identified as the prime suspect. He had attended a party the night of the murders near the area and JB's car was later found. The man had left town shortly after the murders, raising suspicion. Police interviewed him 3 times in Michigan but were unable to provide a clear explanation for the 3 to 4-hour gap in his alibi for the night of the murder. However, these statements were never made public by police. The case against him was eventually dropped after DNA evidence proved his innocence. Another key lead police are investigating is the driver of a small white pickup truck that was spotted at the Big Little store. Security footage captured the truck at the gas station when JB and Tracy stopped to call Tracy's mother from a payphone. The video quality was poor and did not show the driver or anyone getting in or out of the truck. It was impossible to follow a digital trail, as there was no record of gas being purchased at the gas station at the time. After releasing photos of the truck to the media, police asked the public for information, but as leads went cold, the driver and truck were never found. The last potential lead was a Mississippi man who had been extradited to Ozark from Jones County on an unrelated charge of possession of drug paraphernalia. The man had stayed with relatives in Ozark for a short time before leaving town 2 days after the murder, prompting police to question him. However, the questioning yielded no significant information and, without evidence, they were forced to release him. A woman contacted police in March 2000, reporting that she had heard screaming and 2 gunshots on the night of July 31, 1999, near Highway 123 South, just inside the city limits. When asked about her delayed report, she explained that she feared being implicated. Police searched the area thoroughly based on her description and found a 9mm bullet, the same caliber used in the murders of Tracy and J.B. However, the make of the bullet did not match the brand of the shell casing found on Tracy's body. Furthermore, the bullet had no markings that could be used to forensically compare it to other evidence in the case. Unfortunately, this lead ended up being another dead end for the police. Several leads in the J.B. and Tracy case eventually ran into dead ends, but police were determined to find a DNA match. as JB and Tracy's grieving families tried to move on with their lives. The case went cold. Years later, however, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. A major breakthrough came in 2015 when Rena, an auxiliary Ozark police officer, came forward and publicly accused an Ozark police officer of killing JB and Tracy and others of covering up the incident. Rena made several serious allegations related to a 1999 incident in Ozark. According to her, a police officer stopped a man named JB on the night of July 31, 1999, looking for cassette tapes containing recordings of conversations. These tapes allegedly implicated Ozark police officers in a cocaine distribution and profiteering scheme. Rena asserted that the search for the tapes ultimately led to the murders of the two innocent girls. Rena further alleged that several law enforcement officers knew the identity of the killer but chose to cover it up by destroying evidence. They also allegedly threatened her to keep her from speaking out. She specifically named 3 police officers, Gary Butch Whittington, Rex Tipton, and Eddie Henderson, as harassing and threatening her. Rena further accused then-police Chief Tony Spivey, who led the initial investigation, of being involved in the cover-up. However, she did not reveal the identity of the specific police officer she believed was responsible for the murders. Noted American journalist and newspaper editor John B. Carroll wrote an article discussing the case. John B. believes that the officer involved thought that Tracy and JB would use the tapes as evidence in a trial scheduled for August 2, 1999, just 48 hours after they were killed. However, John B. also claims that Rena was severely beaten with a baseball bat after speaking out, which prevented her from naming the real killer. The officers Rena accused all denied any involvement in the murders of JB and Tracy. Without any physical evidence, none of them were ever officially named as suspects in the case. Regardless, the allegations exploded on numerous true crime websites and social media, leading to a defamation lawsuit. On January 29, 2016, Keith Coffin, Rex Tipton, Tony Spivey, Eddie Henderson, and Gary Butch Whittington, all Ozark, Alabama police officers, filed a defamation of character lawsuit against Rena Crum, John B. Carroll, and Dean Matthews. That case was dismissed in 2018. In May 2016, Rena Crum was convicted of molesting JB's sister and was given a suspended sentence and a $250 fine. Over the years, police investigated multiple theories, interviewed hundreds of people, and took DNA samples from several suspects, but to no avail. It took 20 years and the advancement of new DNA technology before police were able to make an arrest. In March 2019, police sent DNA found on JB's body in clothing to Virginia-based Parabon Nano Laboratories, which specializes in DNA. Using a public genealogical database to analyze the suspect's DNA and match it to genetic information led police to a breakthrough in the case. The new evidence linked DNA found at the crime scene to a suspect named Coley McCraney, a man in his 40s. At the time, Coley was not a suspect in the 1999 murders of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hallett, but the discovery changed everything. Coley, an Alabama native, had led a relatively normal life before his DNA linked him to the crimes. Born in Alabama, Coley attended and graduated from Carroll High School in Ozark in 1992, where he was an accomplished athlete and served as president of the school's library club. After completing high school, he enlisted in the United States Air Force and served from 1993 to 1997. Coley's personal life involved several marriages. He married his first wife in 1992 but separated 2 years later and eventually divorced. During this time, his ex-wife accused him of assault and filed a complaint with the Air Force. After the divorce, Coley remarried in 2001 and started a family with his second wife. With the exception of a child support issue in 1998, Coley has no prior criminal record or criminal history. Coley spent 20 years as a truck driver for various companies in Alabama. In addition to his trucking career, he recently co-founded a church and served as a bishop. At the time of the murders, Coley was 26 years old and lived on Lisenby Drive in Ozark, about a mile from where J.B. and Tracy's bodies were discovered in 1999. 20 years after the murders, Coley was arrested on March 19, 2019, following a traffic stop in Daleville, Alabama. During an interview with police, Coley claimed that he did not know J.B. and Tracy. Police did not provide any information about his possible motive. Coley's arrest took the Ozark community by surprise, especially Police Chief Marlon Walker, who attended school with him. Rena Crum, 53, who previously accused the Ozark Police Department of covering up the killings, withdrew her charges at a hearing in August 2022. Coley McCraney, 49, is facing 5 counts of attempted murder for the shooting deaths of J.B. Beasley and Tracy Hollett and is being held without bail in the Dale County Jail ahead of his trial, which is scheduled for April 17, 2023. At trial, Coley admitted that he knew J.B. He had a conversation with J.B. several weeks before the killings in which she introduced herself as Jennifer at the Wiregrass Commons Mall. He testified that on the day of the killings, he and J.B. had consensual sex in his truck. He said he never knew that Jennifer was J.B. Beasley. On April 26, 2023, a jury found Coley McCraney guilty on all charges and sentenced him to life in prison without parole. In July 2023, a Dale County District Court judge denied Coley's request for a new trial. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Brittany Gregory. Brittany Gregory was born on April 1, 1988 in Brick Township and is the youngest of 5 children. Due to her parents' divorce, she had to live with her father but still maintained a close relationship with all of her siblings, especially her older sister Brianna, who is 4 years older than her. Brittany was a model student in school and her teachers believed that she had the potential to become a scholar. However, her passion and dreams were focused on something completely different. She had an ambition to become a forensic scientist and study evidence at crime scenes. At home, Brittany enjoyed her role as the youngest child in the family. According to her mother, Brittany was spoiled, but she was not vain or arrogant. Brittany was a fan of pop culture and her idol was none other than the queen of pop Britney Spears. Her bedroom was decorated with posters of Britney Spears. Aside from music, Brittany enjoys watching cartoons, especially SpongeBob SquarePants. And she can't stop watching TV shows about forensic science, a career she aspires to pursue. Brittany's love for forensic science often brings her closer to her mother. They share a passion for watching TV shows about the subject and often call each other to discuss episodes as they watch them. Brittany, 16, and her 20-year-old sister Brianna live with their father, Joe Dunn, and his girlfriend, Lori Peterson, in a small house near their school. Their house is down the street and near a wooded area. At the time, Brittany was in a 2-year relationship with her 18-year-old boyfriend, John Fitzgerald, a nice guy whose family approved of the relationship, and they were considered the perfect couple. On Sunday, July 11, 2004, Brittany's mother, Deborah, and her sister, Brianna, were visiting her brother and his wife, who had a newborn daughter, in the town of South Toms River, 15 miles from their home. That evening, Brittany called her mother on her cell phone at approximately 8:30 p.m. to ask for a ride to John's house. However, Brittany seemed upset. Her mother explained that she was out of town and couldn't drive Brittany, but said that her sister Brianna could be there in about an hour. Brittany agreed to wait for her sister. Approximately 45 minutes after Brittany called, Brianna was free and attempted to call her back. However, her call went unanswered, leading Brianna to assume that Brittany was either asleep or had gone to John's house with someone else. The next morning, when Brianna returned home, she found Brittany was gone, but all of her belongings, including her phone, were still in the house. This seemed unusual, as Brittany rarely left her phone behind and often informed her family of her plans. Brianna contacted Brittany's friends, but none of them knew of her sister's whereabouts. After failing to reach Brittany, Brianna decided to call John. According to John, he last spoke to Brittany on the phone on Sunday morning and they had not seen or spoken to each other since. Lori Peterson, a family friend who lived with them, said she returned home around 10 p.m. Sunday and did not find Brittany there. Brianna reported her sister missing to the police, sensing that something was wrong. Initially, the police did not believe that Brittany had actually disappeared, thinking that she might have run away or been with friends. However, Brianna explained that she had contacted Brittany's friends and boyfriend, none of whom had any information on her whereabouts. Brianna was convinced that her sister Brittany had not run away from home because she was a diligent student and spent most of her time at the library. Brittany also never left the house without notice, and all of her personal belongings, including her phone and money, were still at home. Initially, the police suspected that Brittany had run away, but after speaking with Brianna, they began a thorough investigation. First, they went to Brittany's house to check her room for clues. They confirmed that her purse, containing her phone, ID, and makeup, was still there, but they did not find anything unusual. The police interviewed everyone who lived in the house and eventually ruled out the possibility that Brittany's relatives were involved in her disappearance. Next, they expanded their search to the surrounding area, checking nearby homes, examining property, and interviewing neighbors. They are looking for potential witnesses who may have seen or heard something suspicious. While searching, officers found that Brittany's house was located at the end of the road, near a wooded area. When they spoke to neighbors, they did not see anything suspicious, except for a woman who claimed to have seen Brittany walking down the road, heading toward the wooded area. Numerous police interviews with her family, neighbor, and teachers revealed that no one had anything bad to say about Brittany. Everyone spoke very highly of her. However, her sister, Brianna, mentioned that Brittany and her boyfriend, John, had been arguing frequently recently, including one on the day she went missing. This argument upset Brittany and she wanted to visit John that evening to make up. In order to better understand John's relationship with Brittany, the police asked him to come to the police station for questioning. At the station, John reported that his last phone conversation with Brittany took place on Sunday morning. At the time, he was at the beach with friends, which upset Brittany because she was not there. The argument resulted in them not speaking to each other since then. John also revealed that he and Brittany had recently broken up. Although she knew he was dating someone else, Brittany had a hard time accepting the breakup. According to John, he had no plans to see Brittany on the night she went missing and did not know she would come to his house. He attributed the breakup to a rumor that Brittany kissed another guy at a party, which he did not witness. However, this rumor prompted him to end their relationship and start dating someone else. John last saw Brittany on July 10th, the day before she disappeared, when she gave him a letter. In the letter, Brittany expressed her desire to make amends. After receiving permission from John, the police examined the letter, which contained Brittany's apology for her actions and her desire to remain friends with John. John appeared genuinely concerned and worried about Brittany's disappearance. Despite initial suspicions, the police had no evidence linking him to her disappearance. After passing a lie detector test, he was cleared as a suspect. However, John did provide the police with one important detail. He revealed that Brittany often took a shortcut through the woods behind her father's house to visit him. This new information adds complexity to the case, leading police to consider the possibility that Brittany attempted to reach John's house, a mile away, by walking through the woods on the night she disappeared. It was nighttime when Brittany went missing, making it likely that she got lost in the dark woods along the route she had taken. In order to find her, the police launched a search in the woods near her home. However, being in the woods at night is scary and dangerous, and the question of why a young girl would not be afraid to walk through the woods in the dark is puzzling. The search in the woods lasted for 3 days but yielded no results. Just when the investigation seemed to be stalled, the police received information from a woman who claimed to have been in a nearby park the night Brittany went missing. The woman said that she had been with her brother in the quiet, deserted park, with no cars in sight except one, a Chevrolet pickup truck with distinctive wheels that had driven past. The woman had noticed the car and even remembered its license plate number. After verifying the information, the police discovered that the car belonged to Anthony Geiger, 23. To determine if Anthony was involved in Brittany's disappearance, the police began to look into his past. Their findings revealed that Anthony was the ex-boyfriend of Bobby Joe, Brittany's older sister. According to Bobby Joe, they had broken up a month earlier due to Anthony's excessive jealousy, especially his excessive attention to Brittany. She began to suspect that Anthony, 23, had feelings for her younger sister Brittany, which eventually led her to end the relationship with him. Brittany's friends recalled that Anthony often looked at Brittany strangely and tried to flirt with her. During their last meeting at lunch, Anthony tried to flirt with Brittany again. This aroused the police's suspicions, so they brought Anthony in for questioning in connection with Brittany's disappearance. Anthony claimed that he was not in the area on the evening of July 11th until the following day, July 12th, after police had begun searching for Brittany. Although he admitted to being friends with Brittany and seeing her regularly at gatherings, he maintained that they were just friends and denied any attempts to flirt with her. Anthony claimed that he considered Brittany too young for him and only saw her as a friend. According to Anthony, he was at home with his new girlfriend on the evening of July 11th. His girlfriend confirmed his alibi, but because his home was close to Brittany's, police still considered him a suspect. Police returned to examine a letter Brittany had written to John and noticed disturbing signs that she was saying goodbye to her lover, raising concerns that she may have been planning to harm herself after breaking up with her boyfriend. Brittany's parents, however, disagreed with this theory, describing their daughter as intelligent and determined. They believed that Brittany's passion for life and ambitious plans were unlikely to be derailed by a breakup. As the investigation stalled, police turned to the media to gather information from witnesses and enlisted the help of nearby police departments. Brittany's parents also joined the search effort, as they grew increasingly frustrated with waiting and doing nothing. They decided to take action by canvassing the neighborhood, going door to door and asking locals about Brittany. The police returned to the starting point of the investigation, Brittany's home. It was puzzling that she had left her phone behind, especially since she had planned to meet her boyfriend. This led to new questions. Was she kidnapped from her own home? If so, was the perpetrator someone she knew and trusted? During a thorough search of the house, the police found something important in Brittany's room, namely her diary, which contained a handwritten letter. The police considered the contents of the letter to be extremely important because it revealed the truth about Brittany's family relationships, which had been shrouded in secrecy. In the letter, Brittany described her life in detail. She wrote about her friendships, boyfriends, schoolwork, and her difficulties with her family. Specifically, she wrote that she came from a dysfunctional family, that she visited her brother in prison every Sunday, that her mother was a drug addict and abandoned her when she was 9 years old, and that she now lived with her father, with whom she was not very close, and his various girlfriends. Despite acknowledging her own shortcomings and past mistakes, Brittany expressed her determination to break free from the cycle of dysfunctional family life. Her goal was to become a forensic scientist and make a positive impact by helping solve crimes. After reading the letter, the police investigation shifted its focus to Brittany's family, who were not initially considered suspects. Police began investigating each family member and discovered that a male massage parlor, which was actually a front for prostitution, was being operated from their home by Lori Peterson, a friend of Brittany's father. Neighbors knew that Lori did not provide legitimate massages but only intimate services for money, which she openly advertised by handing out business cards in the area. Neighbors also reported that suspicious people often gathered at Brittany's father's home to use illegal drugs. Several men, most of whom Lori did not know, came to use her services. It is possible that one of her clients abducted Brittany from her home. After Brittany went missing, more than 100 police officers were tasked with identifying everyone who had visited Joe Dunn's home over the past month. A week after Brittany went missing, on July 18th, police made a breakthrough when they arrested a suspect in connection with the murder. However, at the time of the arrest, Brittany's body had not been found, making the news extremely difficult for her family to accept, as they still held out hope that she was still alive. When police released a photo of the suspect, Brittany's mother, Deborah, recognized the man as 38-year-old Jack Fuller, a family friend of 20 years. Jack regularly attended family gatherings and had developed a close relationship with the family over time, to the point where his daughter was engaged to Brittany's brother, who is currently in custody. Her mother Deborah was shocked by the news, finding it hard to believe that Jack could be involved in such a crime. The fact that his children were friends with Brittany made the allegations even harder to accept, and the family continued to hold out hope that Brittany was still alive. Jack had a lengthy criminal history, with numerous incidents and arrests over the years. His crimes included breaking into vehicles, homes, and sheds, as well as using and selling drugs. He was known to be aggressive, once threatening someone with a baseball bat and fighting with police during a scuffle. Jack also had a habit of lying to police about his identity, which he did after being arrested for driving under the influence. Court records show that he was arrested more than a dozen times over a 10-year period and had served time in state prison for theft and violating his parole. Neighbors said they feared Jack and often chose not to report his crimes because of threats. He was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison at his most recent trial, but was released about a year before Brittany went missing. Brittany's parents believed Jack might have stolen money or jewelry to buy drugs. But they did not believe he would harm their daughter. However, after Jack was arrested, police revealed how they were able to connect him to Brittany's disappearance. The key piece of evidence began with a phone call to the police station. The caller reported that Jack had confided in him a few days earlier about having back pain after burying a body in sandy soil. According to the caller, Jack was confident that the body's location would not be discovered and even asked for advice on how deep to bury it to avoid being smelled by animals. The police invited the informant to the police station and asked him to wear a wiretap to meet Jack Fuller and talk to him about the crimes, including the murder. The informant agreed and wore a wiretap to the meeting. During the conversation, Jack confessed to the murder, saying that he had buried the victim's body in a remote location that would never be found. However, he did not mention the victim's name. In addition, Jack said that he needed to kill someone else who knew too much. Pointing to his friend Tommy, the police were sure that Tommy knew something important that could help solve the case, otherwise Jack would not want to eliminate him. The police took Tommy to the police station for questioning, but he initially refused to cooperate, claiming that he had no information about the case. However, the police knew he was not telling the truth. The police played Tommy a recorded conversation between Jack and another person, in which Jack revealed his desire to harm Tommy because he was likely to reveal information. Realizing that his safety was in danger, Tommy decided to work with the police. He explained that on the night Brittany went missing, he and Jack had been driving around the neighborhood smoking marijuana. They stopped in front of Brittany's house, and Jack decided to go in to talk to Brittany's father about some issues. When he entered, Jack discovered that Brittany was the only person there. 5 minutes after Jack left, he returned to the car with Brittany, who was sitting in the back seat. Tommy said he was confused by her sudden appearance and asked what was going on, but Brittany remained silent, avoiding eye contact. Jack only said that he would drive Tommy home. When they arrived at Tommy's house, Brittany got out of the back seat and moved into the front passenger seat after Tommy got out of the car. Jack then drove away with Brittany. The next day, Jack did not mention the events of the previous day when he met Tommy again. That day, Jack took his car to the car wash, where he washed it thoroughly inside and out. This behavior was unusual for Jack, as he had never done this before. The car wash attendant even joked about washing the car thoroughly, but Jack reacted aggressively, warning the attendant to mind his own business or he would be in danger. Tommy discovered that Brittany was missing and immediately suspected Jack of being involved. He directly asked Jack what happened to her, but Jack's response was aggressive and evasive. Jack claimed to have taken Brittany home, but his attitude was threatening, warning Tommy to ignore it or he would be in trouble. The police found Jack's behavior suspicious and decided to arrest him. Upon arrival, they found Jack holding a can of gasoline, apparently preparing to set the car on fire to destroy potential evidence. During the search, blood was found in the car, and forensics determined that it was Brittany's blood. After the police found out that Jack had visited a car wash after a trip with Brittany, they went there and confiscated the vacuum cleaner he was using. A major discovery was made when criminologists found blood-stained sand inside a vacuum cleaner, and subsequent testing confirmed that the blood was Brittany's. However, despite this incriminating evidence, Jack refused to confess to Brittany's abduction and murder. He also refused to discuss the matter further. The police interviewed all of Jack's acquaintances. Most of them believed that Jack was capable of murder, describing him as a reckless man. Many described him as someone who would do anything. Although Jack did not work anywhere, he always had money. A major revelation came during the investigation. A patrol officer reported seeing Jack's car parked on the side of the road near the woods on the night Brittany disappeared. At the time, police were unaware of Brittany's disappearance and approached Jack, who claimed he was looking for his dog that had run off into the woods. With this information, the search for the body focused on the area where police had seen Jack's car. A comprehensive search effort was launched, involving officers, K-9 units, helicopters, and volunteers. Unfortunately, despite these efforts, the search was unsuccessful in locating Brittany's body. Police believe Brittany needed a ride to her boyfriend's house that night and asked Jack for help. Jack agreed, but instead of taking her to her destination, he dropped off his friend Tommy and took advantage of the situation to attack and kill Brittany. Police needed to find her body to build a case against Jack. While police were trying to get Jack to confess, a vital witness came forward. A woman who had previously been held hostage by Jack for months contacted police, claiming that she might know where he had hidden Brittany's body. The woman was a former drug addict and Jack had held her hostage for months before she escaped. She had learned of Jack's habits during her captivity and knew his usual haunts. She remembered him showing her a location near power lines, which he claimed would be the perfect place to dump the body without being detected. Initially, police were skeptical of the woman's claims but began questioning her. She provided detailed information about the location, including its location in Lakewood and the condition of the soil. This information caught the attention of police, as it matched an earlier tip from an informant who reported that Jack had complained about the difficulty of burying a body in sandy soil. Police conducted a search in the area identified by the woman, about 3 miles from Brittany's residence. The search effort, involving more than 100 people each day, continued for several days despite initially being fruitless. However, a major breakthrough came when experts compared sand found in Jack's vacuum cleaner at the car wash with soil in the search area, confirming a perfect match. The discovery fueled police's determination to continue searching the densely wooded area on the border of Monmouth and Ocean counties. On the morning of Tuesday, July 27, 2004, 15 days after Brittany was reported missing, she was found by 3 New Jersey K-9 officers who had brought their dogs along on a weekend search to help. Brittany's body was found in a ditch, and a collar with Brittany's name on it was found around her neck. Police knew right away that they had finally found her. The medical examiner confirmed the body's identity as Brittany Gregory through an autopsy. However, due to significant decomposition and multiple injuries, including strangulation and severe head trauma, the medical examiner was unable to determine a sole cause of death. A prosecutor clarified that head trauma was not the primary cause of death. Brittany's body showed no obvious signs of sexual assault, but the medical examiner did not rule out rape. Jack eventually accepted the plea deal after discussing the option with his attorney, a decision that was also supported by Brittany's family, who wanted to avoid a lengthy and grueling trial. Brittany's mother explained that her primary motivation for the deal was not to seek the death penalty for Jack, as she believed that would be too easy an outcome for him. Instead, she wanted Jack to spend the rest of his life in prison, reflecting on his actions and suffering the consequences of his actions. According to Jack, the chain of events that led to the incident began when Brittany asked him to drive her to her boyfriend's house, which Jack agreed to. After dropping off his companion, Tommy, Jack was going to take Brittany to her destination. However, he stopped on the side of the road and started smoking marijuana, which angered Brittany. She screamed and slapped him on the hand. This provoked a violent reaction from Jack, who began punching Brittany. Jack confessed to punching Brittany in the face and head at least twice because she tried to interfere with his marijuana smoking. After the attack, Brittany began gasping for air and making gurgling noises while Jack continued to get high as blood poured from her nose and mouth. When he finally turned to her, Brittany had stopped breathing. He realized she was dead and decided to dispose of her body. However, Jack's testimony was not credible because the medical examiner found signs of strangulation that Jack did not mention. Additionally, he did not explain why he removed all of Brittany's clothes. The prosecution believed the crime was sexually motivated and a jury indicted Jack on February 9, 2005, for murder. Jack Fuller pleaded guilty on October 18, 2005, to intentionally causing serious injury resulting in death. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison without parole on January 13. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of James Dale Ritchie. Summer 2016 in Anchorage, Alaska's most populous city, which serves as the de facto capital and is home to around 300,000 residents. On July 3, 2016, at 7:40 a.m., a woman riding a bicycle was the first to report a disturbing discovery to the 911. She found the bodies of two young men lying in the grass next to a road called Ship Creek. From their clothing, it appeared that they were a young man and woman with severe head injuries and a large amount of blood around them, leading people to assume that they were dead. The cyclist quickly realized that something terrible had happened to these people and immediately called for help. Sadly, when paramedics and police arrived, the victims were beyond help, having died shortly before they were discovered, as evidenced by the warmth remaining in their bodies. It was clear that their deaths were the result of a violent attack. Autopsies confirmed that they had been shot in the chest and head. Police identified the deceased as Jason Nett, 41, and Brianna Foys, 20, through their identification cards. Brianna was born in 1996 and had a difficult childhood, which led to her and her sister being placed in a refugee camp. However, their lives changed for the better when Brianna was 5 years old. Marcella Foy's family adopted them, creating a family with other children. Brianna suffered from attachment disorder, which made it difficult for her to form emotional bonds with her caregivers. This led to trust issues and challenges adapting to new situations, as well as problems interacting with others socially. Despite these obstacles, however, Brianna was an energetic, outgoing young woman with a strong passion for music, especially Broadway shows. She had a talent for singing and often shared short videos of her performances. However, behind her positive exterior and love of life, Brianna faced many difficulties. Her adoptive mother, Marcella, revealed that Brianna's developmental issues hindered her ability to make good choices, especially when it came to the people she chose to spend time with and the situations she found herself in. As a result, she fell into the wrong crowd. This led her to experiment with psychoactive substances and develop a substance abuse problem. Her foster mother, Marcella, tried to help Brianna by encouraging her to seek help and treatment. However, by the time Brianna turned 18, she was an adult and free to make her own decisions, even if they were not in her best interests. Unfortunately, Brianna chose to prioritize her independence and decided to go it alone, resisting her mother's efforts to guide her down a better path. She became homeless again due to family rules and her financial situation. However, she maintained a close relationship with her mother and temporarily stayed in homeless shelters. Jason Nett, another victim of the incident, also had a hard time getting his life together. With his kind and helpful nature and love of nature and animals, he was well liked by everyone. Unfortunately, Jason struggled with drug addiction and had several run-ins with the law. His unemployment further complicated his life, leaving him unable to provide child support for his 2 daughters. In the summer of 2016, he found temporary shelter at a landfill in Anchorage near the Ship Creek Bike Trail, where both he and Brianna were eventually found dead. Despite their age difference, Jason and Brianna formed a strong friendship after a long period of homelessness. Jason became a protector in Brianna's life, especially since she was a child. He tried to protect her from harm, but unfortunately, he was unable to do so, as tragic circumstances led to both of them being shot and killed near a trail. Upon arriving, the police's first action was to thoroughly inspect the victims and the crime scene. They quickly observed that there were no shell casings near the victims, leading them to deduce that the killer may have used a revolver, a type of gun known for its ability to retain the shell casing inside the chamber when fired. Additionally, a bullet was discovered near where Jason and Brianna lay, indicating that the shooter had aimed at the couple but missed, instead hitting a nearby wooden fence. The bullet was seized as evidence and sent for forensic examination. Expert analysis confirmed the initial theory that a revolver had been used and even identified the exact model. It was discovered that the gun was a CT Python 357, a high-precision 6-shot revolver, known for its responsive trigger and exceptional accuracy, making it a top choice in its class. This model is also relatively hard to find. As police continued their investigation, they decided to interview the key witness who had initially contacted emergency services about the gruesome discovery. Her account added a strange twist to the case. She said that the discovery of Brianna and Jason's bodies was no accident. She had been led to them by a mysterious stranger. She detailed to the police that during her morning bike ride across the bridge, a man had nonchalantly informed her of the bodies of 2 people lying on the trail below, and warned her to be aware of her surroundings before proceeding. Prompted by the stranger's mysterious instructions, she ventured down the trail, where she found the victims and then contacted emergency services. The police were particularly intrigued by this stranger. He did not report the bodies himself, and his strangely calm demeanor made it seem as though he was warning of a minor inconvenience rather than a deadly tragedy. This strange encounter led the police to speculate that he may have been involved in the murders of the 2 victims. Unfortunately, the witness was unable to give a detailed description of the man, as she was more focused on the horrific scene before her than on the person who had directed her there. She could not recall any specific features, clothing, or identifying characteristics of this man. Police reviewed nearby surveillance footage, hoping to find clues. They focused on cameras in the industrial park near Ship Creek, since the trail itself does not have cameras. After reviewing footage from around the time of the emergency call, they found a man on the trail just before the incident. Unfortunately, the man was walking away from the camera, so his face could not be seen. The footage only provided a general description of him. He was wearing blue pants, possibly a hoodie or a hat, a jacket, and a backpack. The only clear detail was his height. However, the information was still too limited to draw any concrete conclusions, so police continued to search by. Police released the footage, hoping that someone might be able to identify him based on his clothing. Their primary goal was to identify the stranger and investigate further to see if he had any connection to the crime. However, the man did not come forward, and although the police received some information about his possible identity, none of it led to any concrete results, and the investigation was eventually dropped. While investigating Brianna and Jason's backgrounds, the police spoke to people they knew and their relatives to try to find a motive for the murders. They explored many possibilities, including unpaid debts to drug dealers, disputes with other homeless people over territory, or the possibility of being the unintended victims of a gang conflict. However, despite considering various theories, they found no concrete evidence to support these ideas. Ultimately, the investigation revealed that Jason and Brianna were not specifically targeted, but that they were random victims present at the scene of the shooting. This is an unpredictable danger in the community, the possibility that the killer could strike randomly again. In the early morning of July 29, 2016, a tragic shooting occurred in East Anchorage, claiming the life of Tryon Kindle Thompson, 21, affectionately known as Trey. The incident occurred less than a month after the discovery of Jason Netter and Brianna Fuzzy, which increased fear in the community. Tryon was a special young man, known for his kindness and willingness to help others. He often took in homeless people and provided them with meals at his home. That morning, Tryon was on his way to his aunt's house to feed her dog while she was away. As he approached his aunt's house on his bicycle, an unknown assailant shot and killed him. Police found Tryon's body on the street with gunshot wounds to the head and torso. As with the previous case, no shell casings were found at the scene, but a nearby surveillance camera captured the incident. The camera installed at Tryon's aunt's house captured the events leading up to the shooting. At approximately 3 a.m., a man was seen walking down the street before suddenly pulling out a handgun and shooting Tryon. In the footage, it is shown that after Tryon collapsed, the attacker calmly walked up to him, put the pistol in his pocket, took Tryon's bike and rode off into the night. The surveillance video was not the only evidence gathered. The incident was also witnessed by two young girls who stayed up late, passionately telling scary stories by the window of a nearby house. At first, they became concerned when they noticed a tall figure lurking in the street. Then their attention turned to another figure further down the street. Tryon, just before the fatal shot rang out. After momentarily averting their gaze, they looked back to witness the tragic aftermath, Trey lying motionless on the ground and the assailant making a slow escape on the bicycle past their vantage point. The girls who witnessed the incident provided police with a detailed description of the shooter. They described him as an older man with some distinctive features: wavy shoulder-length hair, heavy boots, a baseball cap, and a camouflage jacket. He was notably tall. After reviewing surveillance footage, experts estimated the shooter to be about 6 feet 2 inches tall, possibly taller. Based on the girls' accounts, a composite sketch of the suspect was created and released to the public, along with a photo of the stolen bicycle. Police warned the community to remain vigilant. Police quickly found a connection between Tryon's murder and the previous murders on Ship Creek Trail. Deepening the mystery, as Tryon, like Brianna and Jason, had no apparent enemies or known reason to be targeted, raising the disturbing possibility of random acts of killing. A thorough forensic investigation confirmed that the same weapon was used in all 3 murders, suggesting that a serial killer was present in Anchorage. As the case unfolded, public reaction to the composite sketch generated a series of leads. Tryon's mother, Minnie Primo, was determined to find her son's killer. She actively shared the sketch of the suspect and gathered information about the attacker. This led her to a crucial discovery. She saw a cyclist who matched Trayon's stolen bike on the night of his murder. The person was heading toward a local shelter, a remote area that houses temporary shelters for people without stable housing. Realizing the importance of this discovery, many immediately notified the police. A patrol unit was dispatched to the shelter, where they found the bicycle and took it in for further investigation. Nearby, hidden in a tree hollow, they also discovered a gun. After speaking with residents of the shelter, police quickly identified the owner of both the bicycle and the pistol. The suspect was then taken to the police station for questioning. However, as police continued to speak with the man, they began to doubt whether they had the right person. Further investigation revealed that the homeless man was a former New York Police Department officer. However, surveillance footage of the suspect showed him holding the pistol with one hand, while police are trained to hold their guns with both hands. This discrepancy makes the homeless man unlikely to be the perpetrator. Additionally, the pistol found in the tree was a different model than the Colt Python .357 used in the 3 previous cases. A closer look at the bicycle revealed that it bore only a slight resemblance to the one stolen from Trayon. Based on these findings, the homeless man was eliminated as a suspect, extinguishing initial hopes of a lead in the case. A month after Trayon's death, Anchorage police were alerted to another homicide in the same area. On the night of August 28, 2016, a woman walking through Moon Valley Park called 911 when she discovered the body of a young man, later identified as 34-year-old Kevin Turner. Kevin was homeless, like Brianna and Jason. Sadly, Kevin suffered from schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and he had sought out a facility that focused on mental health care but had not found one that met his needs. And now his life was tragically cut short. Kevin was found sitting on a picnic bench in the park with his head resting on a table, holding a pair of socks. His shoes had been removed and placed next to him, suggesting he may have been shot while wearing socks. It appears he did not notice the attacker, as there was no indication that he had attempted to hide from the gunfire. Nearby, police discovered a second victim, Bryant DeHassan, 25, a local environmental activist, who was out cycling at night. Bryant's body was found not far from where Kevin had been in the park. Police discovered that shell casings had disappeared from the scene, similar to the previous 2 incidents. The bullets that killed Bryant and Kevin were fired from the same Colt Python .3576 shotgun. This led police to believe that the same person was responsible for all 3 attacks, bringing the total number of victims to 5. Despite this breakthrough, however, police were still unable to identify or track down the suspect. After the 3rd attack, Anchorage police warned residents of a serial killer on the loose, advising them to be vigilant and stay away from public parks and bike paths, especially at night. The attacker targeted victims at random, without any prior planning or specifics, leaving everyone feeling threatened. As a result, the community was plunged into fear. To aid the investigation, police offered a $10,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the killer. Despite receiving numerous tips, the investigation has not made significant progress. The situation took a major turn in November 2016 when a completely separate incident accidentally led police to a suspect. On November 12, 2016, at approximately 4:30 a.m., Officer Arn Saleo, of the Anchorage Police Department, was patrolling downtown. He received a call about a nearby incident. A taxi driver had reported that a passenger had run away without paying his fare nearby. Officer Arn Saleo decided to search the area on the deserted streets before dawn for fare evaders. Arn Saleo saw a man walking on the sidewalk and wanted to know if he had seen anything unusual. From inside his car, Arn Saleo asked the man to stop, but the man did not listen to him and continued walking. This was recorded on the patrol car's dashboard camera. Despite Arnsalleo's repeated orders to stop, the man refused. Arnsalleo then used the car's loudspeaker to give the order again. A moment later, the man turned around and walked toward Arnsalleo's car. Instead of speaking, the man suddenly attacked Arnsalleo, pulled a pistol from his clothes, and fired at the police. Arnsalleo got out of the car and returned fire. Nearby, Sergeant Mark Patuk intervened to help his colleague, also shooting at the attacker. Arnsalleo was hit 4 times, suffering serious injuries to his bones, liver, and intestines. Despite his serious injuries, Arnsalleo survived the attack and was rushed to the hospital for emergency treatment. He underwent a 7-hour surgery to treat his injuries. However, the perpetrator did not survive, dying from a fatal gunshot wound to the skull, and was pronounced dead at the scene. It was only after the man died that police, who had been investigating a series of recent crimes in Anchorage, discovered a connection between the man and their prime suspect. They analyzed footage from the police car's dashboard camera and compared it to footage from other cameras from previous incidents. Their investigation revealed that the stranger fit the profile of the serial killer, a tall man wearing a baseball cap and camouflage jacket, who fired his gun with only one hand. Although evidence was limited, it was determined that the gunman had used a Colt Python .357, the same type of gun involved in the 5 previous deaths. Through further investigation, the gunman was eventually identified as James Dale Ritchie. James Dale Ritchie was born on November 4, 1976, in Anchorage, Alaska. During his high school years, James stood out not only for his height but also for his exceptional intelligence. He played football and basketball, showing that he had the potential to pursue a professional sports career. After graduating in 1994, James' impressive talent attracted the attention of the West Virginia University football team, leading to his recruitment. He initially attended college for 1 semester but then dropped out to pursue a different path. Upon returning to Anchorage, James' life began to decline. He became addicted to drugs and became involved in a variety of illegal activities, including burglary and drug trafficking. James' involvement in these activities led to numerous arrests and a notable conviction in 2005 for burglary and attempted kidnapping, in which he used zip ties and 2 handguns. After 2 years in custody, James returned to Anchorage, where he may have purchased his Colt Python .357 revolver. In 2013, Ritchie relocated to his parents' home in the quaint Virginia town of Broadway. Even his mother expressed fear of him, describing him as a potential danger. She was convinced that her son's fate was either a lifetime in prison or a violent death. Despite these ominous predictions, Ritchie appeared to seek a change. He started to prepare for an associate's degree at a nearby college and attended classes. James was reportedly amiable to his neighbors, began relationships, and even experienced love. Nevertheless, Ritchie's later choices led him to a grim series of violent offenses culminating in his death during an encounter with law enforcement. Ritchie seemed to be realigning his life, yet this phase was short-lived. His romantic relationship concluded in a manner far removed from what he had hoped, causing deep distress for both individuals involved. Struggling to manage his feelings, Ritchie made his way back to Anchorage in March 2016. He even pursued mental health support and took antidepressants for a period. Law enforcement was unable to confirm if Ritchie had been formally diagnosed with any psychiatric condition, but indications suggest he might have genuinely struggled with schizophrenia. Following his passing, a former housemate disclosed that James Dale Ritchie frequently uttered bizarre claims, like possessing the power to alter weather conditions, sincerely believing he could summon rain or bring out the sun. He also harbored beliefs about his ability to dictate life and death, choosing who would survive and who would perish. Even posthumously, James Dale Ritchie was identified as the primary suspect in multiple shootings. Though detectives lacked concrete evidence to conclusively link him to the crimes. The similarities in physical description and the identical firearm used in all 5 cases provided a strong basis for suspicion. The challenge now lay in compiling additional proof to provide fresh assurances to the public. In the course of searching Ritchie's residence, law enforcement officials found 18 shell casings concealed in his closet, precisely matching the count of rounds discharged from the revolver in all 5 incidents. Ballistic analysis confirmed that the firearm belonging to Ritchie was responsible for the fatalities of the victims. This proof was deemed sufficient to officially declare in April 2017 that James Dale Ritchie was the assailant behind the serial offenses that had cast a shadow of terror over Anchorage for months. In 2013, James moved back to his parents' home in Broadway, Virginia. His biological mother was terrified that he would be a danger to her. She predicted that his future would include life in prison or a violent death. However, despite these dire predictions, James seemed determined to change. He began attending college, pursuing an associate's degree, building relationships with his neighbors, and even falling in love. However, James's later choices led him to a series of horrific acts of violence that culminated in his death in a police encounter. James tried to get his life back on track, but this period of stability did not last long. His love affair ended in a way he had not expected, causing significant distress for both of them. While he was grieving over a past relationship, James returned to Anchorage in March 2016 and sought professional help for his mental health, including taking antidepressants for a period of time. Police have not been able to confirm whether James was formally diagnosed, but there are indications that he may have indeed struggled with schizophrenia. After James's death, a former roommate voiced concerns about his mental state, sharing that he often made unusual claims about having supernatural powers, such as controlling the weather, and believed he had the power to decide who lived and who died. James was identified as the prime suspect in several shootings, even after his death. Although police did not have concrete evidence directly linking him to the crimes, they did find some important clues. The suspect's physical description matched the description provided by witnesses, and the same gun was used in all 5 shootings. To build their case, police searched James' home and found 18 shell casings hidden in his closet. This was significant because it matched the total number of bullets fired in all 5 cases. Police also conducted ballistics analysis, which confirmed that James' gun was the one used to kill the victims in the mass murders. With this new evidence, police were able to officially declare in April 2017 that James was responsible for the serial crimes that had terrorized Anchorage for months. Unfortunately, this revelation did little to console the victims' families, who wanted the perpetrator arrested, tried, and sentenced to life in prison. The reason behind Ritchie's murderous actions against these 5 people remains elusive and will probably never be solved. Regrettably, this revelation did little to comfort the victims' families, who would have preferred for the culprit to be apprehended, tried, and sentenced to life imprisonment. The rationale behind Ritchie's lethal actions against these 5 persons remains elusive and is probably destined to stay unresolved. An intriguing detail surfaced that may or may not bear relevance to the case. In his youth, James had been close to the father of Trey Thompson, Bobby Thompson. This long-standing friendship persisted, and at the time of his son Trey's murder, Bobby was incarcerated for offenses involving illicit drugs and firearms. This element prompts speculation on whether Ritchie was aware of his target that fateful night and if the memory of his friend crossed his mind. Evidently devoid of any remorse, Ritchie perpetuated his criminal spree. His apprehension was fortuitous, suggesting that if not for that incidental encounter, the tally of his victims could have exceeded 5. If you like this story, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. Don't forget to like and share your opinion in the comments. This is Jeremy, see you in the next video. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Frank Spencer. Frank Spencer was born on November 10, 1965 in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, to Cyrus and Melline Spencer. Growing up, he enjoyed active games and sports, which helped him develop a strong physique. During his high school years, Frank excelled as a member of the wrestling team and showed exceptional leadership abilities. After graduating from high school in 1984, Frank continued his studies at a local university and completed his studies in 1988. After the death of his father, Frank took over the family business, becoming the owner of Spencer's Auto Parts and Used Cars. An important event in the young man's life took place in 1997, when he met Maria through a mutual friend, Paul Siciliano. Frank Spencer and Maria immediately became close, attracted to each other's dynamic personalities. Maria was known for her hot temper, strong will and bold personality, and was also extremely affectionate. However, not everyone was happy with the relationship. Maria's father, Anthony Rocco, did not approve of Frank and even tried to prevent their marriage. Frank's family was also unhappy with his choice. Due to the opposition of both families, the couple decided to elope and rent an apartment. Eventually, their families were forced to accept their feelings. Maria and Frank got married and started a family, having a son and a daughter. They moved to a new house, and Frank worked hard to provide for his family through his auto parts business and sponsorship of racing cars. As the head of the family, his children became his top priority and motivation. However, Maria's priorities were different. She doesn't take care of her family, she's cold to the kids. Unlike her husband, she's not passionate about the marriage. She loves to spend what Frank earns, and what really worries her is money. Maria's behavior increasingly caused problems in their marriage. Frank became increasingly dissatisfied with her selfishness and eccentric behavior. He felt that as a mother, she should grow up and think of others. However, Maria did not change. In 2006, he filed for divorce, fed up with his wife's inappropriate behavior. Sometimes she behaved so irrationally that Frank feared for the children's health. At that time, the idea of divorce seemed like the only right solution. However, the confrontation became more tense as Frank sought to gain custody of the children. He did not trust his ex-wife Maria and believed that she was not capable of properly caring for the children. However, not everyone agreed with his stance. His friend Ron argued that both parents were necessary for the healthy development of the children and advised Frank to negotiate a joint custody agreement with Maria. Despite this, Frank was adamant about pursuing sole custody, believing he knew what was best. In response, Maria also pushed for sole custody and was expecting to receive a substantial child support payment. Their conflict, which grew over time. On several occasions, Maria's erratic behavior led to her attacking him and the children. Frank had to call the police. However, some people did not believe Frank. And an incident that happened in 2008 proved his testimony to be true. An argument broke out between Maria and her ex-mother-in-law near her children's school, leading to Maria's arrest. The problem started when Maria went to pick up her daughter, but Frank's mother intervened, trying to stop her. It was later revealed that there was an agreement between the two. Frank's mother would be the one to pick up the children that day. But Maria changed her mind at the last minute, deliberately taking the children away. After the fight, Maria picked up the child and put her in the car, but did not put her in a seatbelt. The police stopped the car and determined that Maria's actions endangered the child's life and health. As a result, Maria faced charges of disorderly conduct. Furthermore, her ex-husband, Frank, accused her of stalking, claiming that she had followed him on multiple occasions. However, the prosecution could not prove that the child's life was in danger, so the police offered Maria a deal. They would drop the child endangerment charges if she pleaded guilty to disorderly conduct and stalking. Maria accepted the deal, pleading guilty and being fined $600. Despite this, Maria did not change her behavior. Instead, she became more outrageous after the incident. Frank's acquaintances and relatives grew increasingly concerned as he shared his complaints about Maria. She began to threaten and her stalking behavior continued. Several of Maria's co-workers later revealed that she often expressed deep hatred for Frank, even stating that she was willing to end his life. This led one co-worker to jokingly call her the Black Widow. Despite the tension, Frank tried to stay calm and resolve the situation amicably. He tried to reason with Maria several times, but she refused to stop her behavior. As a precaution, Frank began to record their conflicts. His intention was not to get Maria into legal trouble, but to have evidence in case things escalated further. Frank just wanted to live and work in peace, but Maria's actions continued to cross the line. By 2009, the Frank's divorce proceedings had dragged on for a long time, with the children staying with their father, Frank. Meanwhile, Frank had begun dating a woman named Julie Dent. Although Maria claimed that she did not mind Frank's new relationship, she was said to have been upset by Julie's closeness to the children. Frank believed that Maria's jealousy was the root cause of the troubles. Maria's anger grew, and in February 2009, she left a voicemail warning Julie to stay away from her children. However, the situation really escalated when Maria's father, Rocco, was released from prison after 5 years for fraud. Frank knew of his ex-father-in-law's reputation and feared more trouble, believing that Maria had inherited her father's erratic temperament. At this point, those around Frank noticed that he was becoming increasingly anxious. After Rocco is released, a robbery occurs at Frank's office, where important documents related to the divorce proceedings are stolen. The next day, Maria contacts Frank, saying that she discovered a trash bag containing interesting items on the porch. Frank understands the implication and advises her to return the stolen items. He also reports the break-in to the police, but despite their best efforts, they are unable to prove that anyone was involved in the incident. According to the police, no evidence of the perpetrators was found. However, it is clear that Maria and her father had a motive for the crime. The investigation considered Maria a suspect, but the case was eventually dropped due to lack of evidence. The police's efforts led Maria to return the documents she had taken from Frank, as these documents did not contain any important information that could be used as evidence in court. The situation continued to worsen until it reached a breaking point. Maria began sending threats to Frank's new girlfriend, Julie, on social media. She was still upset that the children were still in contact with Julie. Unlike Maria, Julie remained calm and enjoyed spending time with Frank and the children. She tried not to get involved in a complicated relationship between Frank and his ex-wife, but Julie was deeply troubled and Maria prioritized revenge over parental responsibility. The disputes between Frank and his ex-wife Maria continued until 2010, when Frank finally lost patience. He went to the police and asked them to evaluate Maria's behavior, providing their correspondence as evidence. The correspondence contained indirect threats, but Maria claimed that this was her way of communicating and that she had no intention of causing harm. Once again, Maria's guilt could not be proven because her warning sounded vague. This time, Maria was not punished. In January 2010, Frank and Julie planned a romantic getaway to the Caribbean, but on the eve of the trip, a fire broke out at his mother's house. Although no one was injured, the house was devastated by flames and smoke. Witnesses reported that Maria drove up to the scene with her neighbors and acquaintances, smiled at the fire, and drove away. After firefighters extinguished the fire, a dog owned by one of Frank's children was found in the ashes. The incident became so serious that Frank had to call the police again, as it became clear that the fire was no accident. Maria's actions had escalated to the point where it was clear that she would not stop until she achieved her goal. The police found no evidence of arson in the first fire and the fire was ruled an accident. Maria later sent Frank a text message in which she gloated about what had happened, and wrote about how karma had caught up with him, and that since her life had been ruined, he could expect more consequences. When the police took no action, Maria became bolder and began openly threatening Frank and his new partner Julie. A few months later, a fire broke out at Julie's house. Fortunately, she was able to escape by jumping from the porch. But her house was severely damaged and uninhabitable. Frank invited Julie to move in with him, although he was concerned that this would anger Maria further, but they had no choice. At the same time, an investigation into the cause of the fire was underway. Since Julie's home was in a different district, she and Frank hoped that the police investigation would be fair. However, the police were unable to help due to lack of evidence, and the fire was ruled an accident. Despite this, Julie was determined to get to the bottom of the matter and appealed to her superiors. This prompted the investigation. Unexpectedly, flares were found in Julie's backyard. Further investigation revealed another flare that could have caused the fire. In addition, experts determined that the steps on the roof of the house had been doused with a flammable mixture. Ultimately, after all the tests and examinations, the cause of the fire was determined to be arson. However, as in previous cases, no one was directly implicated in the crime due to lack of evidence. And those responsible were able to avoid punishment once again. In the summer of 2012, Frank and Julie made a plan to pretend to break up to distract Maria. However, the expected peace did not last long, when Frank's body was discovered on July 3rd, just a few weeks after the couple broke up. When Joe, a friend of Frank's, decided to visit Frank because he had not heard from him recently, when Joe arrived at the bungalow, he felt increasingly worried. The front door was slightly open and there were stains near the entrance. When he entered the house, he saw Frank lying on the floor, dead. Joe moved closer and noticed dried blood in Frank's ear. Without hesitation, he called the emergency services. As news of the incident spread throughout the county, people suspected they knew who was responsible for this heinous crime. Police found several key pieces of evidence at the scene, including large pools of blood, extensive drag marks, clear shoe prints on the floor, and bloody gloves in the kitchen. These were sent for analysis, which revealed that the shoe prints matched the size and style of shoes worn by Maria's father, Rocco. Additionally, Maria's skin particles were discovered inside the gloves, although she had not lived with Frank for over a year, making it unlikely that the gloves had been left behind by accident. The evidence linked Rocco and Maria to the crimes, leading to their arrests. An autopsy and ballistics analysis revealed that Frank had been shot with two different types of guns. He was initially shot with a .30 caliber sniper rifle while standing near the front door. A sniper's nest was discovered approximately 115 feet from the house. The bullet passed through Frank's hand and into his chest, severing a vital artery and causing a fatal wound. However, the attackers continued to attack. They dragged Frank into the house, where a second shot was fired into his head with a .357 Magnum revolver. By that time, the man was already dead, so the final shot was considered an act of revenge. The violent nature of the crime suggests that the shooter had a deep hatred for Frank. Based on this evidence, police suspect that Rocco fired the first shot from the sniper rifle, while Maria fired the last shot. Additionally, police discovered that Frank's car and dog were missing from the house. A review of traffic camera footage showed that Frank's car had been driven away from his home onto an interstate. However, the identity of the driver could not be determined. The car was later found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's home and 5 miles from Maria's. However, no fingerprints or other evidence were found inside the car. 2 days after the incident, Frank's dog was found at a wedding in Dauphin. Attendees immediately recognized the dog as well-groomed, with an electronic chip, and the dog was returned to Frank's mother. It turned out that Frank had acquired a new pet for his children after a fire. This lucky discovery helped to clarify some aspects and effectively expose the crime. According to the investigation, the criminals took the dog with them when they fled the scene. On the way home, Rocco stopped, and during this time, attracted by the smell of food nearby, the dog escaped. It then went to a house where a wedding was taking place. This allowed the police to prove that Rocco's phone was near the wedding venue on the day of the murder, while his Harrisburg residence was 12 miles away, contradicting his claim that he was at home. It is likely that Maria was the one who came up with the idea of bringing the dog to the children, but this decision proved to be a mistake. During questioning, Rocco admitted that his son-in-law had asked him for help several times and had visited him the day before his death, which would explain the traces found at the crime scene. However, Rocco could not explain the presence of the pool of blood. His testimony did not sound sincere, and no one could confirm whether the men were on good terms. Rocco confessed that Frank had given him the car that same day, likely in an attempt to justify the finding of his fingerprints in the victim's home. By making this statement, Rocco inadvertently admitted to having been present at the crime scene the day before. Searches were conducted at Rocco's and Maria's homes for the murder weapon, but no weapon was found, as it was likely that Rocco had thrown it away. Maria also denied any guilt, claiming that the glove had accidentally appeared in Frank's home, possibly brought there by the children. Ultimately, the suspects were released to go home. However, the police continued to collect evidence necessary for the case. The police found a new lead when Derek Reed, a friend of Frank's, spoke to Maria at a school football game. Maria revealed that the last thing her husband saw before he died was her face. This new information caught the attention of the state attorney general, who was already unhappy with the way the police handled Frank's reports. Many people also complained about the matter and an internal investigation was launched. However, it was difficult to prove that the police had neglected their duties. The police claimed that much of the information Frank provided lacked concrete evidence. The police attempted to determine the guilt of the suspects in the case, as well as their involvement in previous crimes, including stalking. And the major interrogation took place in 2013. Maria and Rocco maintained their innocence throughout the process, denying all 12 charges against them. However, their unwillingness to cooperate with the investigation led to charges of providing false testimony. Prosecutors said that Maria and Rocco arrived at Frank's house together, deliberately not using their own car to avoid attention, instead fleeing the scene in a victim's car. In late 2014, Maria was arrested again. Meanwhile, Rocco escaped. After a final interrogation, he boarded a plane and flew to Colombia. Police considered his actions an escape attempt and evidence of his guilt. For nearly a year, Rocco evaded arrest, but was finally arrested in Buenos Aires, Argentina. He was arrested by local police and Rocco attempted to fight deportation back to the United States. However, his efforts were unsuccessful and he was returned to his homeland to face justice. In the fall of 2015, Maria went to trial. Throughout the proceedings, she maintained her innocence and instead blamed her father for the crimes. Maria claimed that she loved Frank and never wanted him dead. However, many witnesses came forward to reveal her true nature, sharing accounts of persistent threats, stalking, and arson. The trial lasted more than a week, after which the jury returned a verdict, finding Maria Spencer guilty on all charges. These included murder, arson, burglary, conspiracy, and menacing. As a result, Maria was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus an additional 50 years. Court observers said Maria smiled throughout the trial. In a later interview, she explained her behavior, saying, "Because I didn't end his life, I tried to stay positive." A few years later, Rocco's trial began. He was furious about his daughter's accusations. Rocco claimed he was only trying to help his daughter and opposed violence. He wanted to say that Maria was the one who encouraged the crime. Despite his claims, physical evidence showed that Rocco was more involved than he let on. In the fall of 2018, Rocco Franklin was convicted of murder, robbery, and arson. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole, plus 45 years. When he was sentenced, Rocco, 77, blew a kiss to the prosecutor and police, then cursed the judge. Years later, Rocco asked for a retrial, arguing that his defense attorney had been ineffective in his conviction. Maria also tried to appeal her case, but both father and son were unsuccessful. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Nicholas Wilcox. Nicholas was born on January 15, 1978 at Day Kimball Hospital in Putnam, Connecticut. Nicholas's grandfather was a boat builder, and his father devoted his life to the construction industry. After graduating in 1996, Nicholas joined the family business and became a roofer. Together with his brother Donald, he worked as a contractor and built up their own client base. At the age of 23, Nicholas got married. He and his wife Kathy, a former classmate, tied the knot. A year later, they had a daughter, and 3 years later, they had twins. During these years, Nicholas worked hard to provide a comfortable life for his family. Nicholas's family and friends say that despite his busy work schedule, he was a thoughtful and caring boyfriend and father. However, he spent too much time working, which eventually led to the breakup of the family. The divorce occurred shortly after the birth of their young children. Nevertheless, he continued to maintain communication with them and support the family. In early 2017, Nicholas sought new opportunities and moved to Florida. This new location promised better jobs and a significant increase in the number of customers and allowing for work almost all year round. Moreover, the state's warm and sunny weather created excellent conditions not only for living but also for business development. In coastal areas often affected by severe storms, so Nicholas's profession became very necessary. After each bad weather event, many houses were damaged and needed repairs and reinforcement. After returning to Connecticut to raise his family, Nicholas returned to Florida. He initially lived in an apartment in Fort Lauderdale but later moved to the suburbs to reduce housing costs. There, he lived in a duplex with his neighbors, Isabella Tagliarini and Eric Robinson. The hurricane season had begun, and Nicholas was struggling with many daily orders. At that time, a hurricane was approaching the area where he lived and worked. The storm had grown into a powerful Category 5 Atlantic tropical storm, with winds of about 177 miles per hour. An emergency warning was issued before the dangerous weather event occurred, and about 7 million people were evacuated from coastal areas. Nicholas spent all his time preparing buildings, reinforcing homes, boarding up windows and doors, and then helping to clean up the damage caused by the natural disaster. All of these tasks were his primary duties, so he was paid to perform them. However, he often helps others without taking any credit. In an interview, Nicholas's brother admitted that Nicholas never refused to help others. In September 2017, as Florida braced for a devastating hurricane, Nicholas was busy making plywood windows. Supply shortages had created long lines at stores. In one of those lines, a woman named Pamela approached Nicholas and told him she didn't have enough materials to reinforce her house. After hearing this, Nicholas was committed to solving the problem. That same evening, he brought her the 7 missing plywood panels and installed them in all the doors and windows of her house, refusing to accept payment, even though he had spent the entire day searching for the necessary materials. Nicholas was deeply moved by Pamela's plight. She was alone with her children and needed outside help. In response, Pamela thanked him. The storm caused a lot of devastation, leaving Nicholas with a lot of long-term work to do. So he decided to hire his next-door neighbor, a woman named Isabella, as his assistant. Her duties included cleaning up after projects and setting up tools for the job. As they spent more time together, their friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. On September 3rd, they made a special vow, which was written in blood on paper, resembling a form of engagement and a promise to live a long and happy life with many children. Although they loved each other dearly, their relationship could not be considered perfect. Almost immediately, small problems and disagreements began to arise. On September 22nd, they had a serious argument, which forced Isabella to leave the house and spend the night in a hotel. However, by the next morning, they had resolved their disagreement and reconciled. Isabella expressed that she felt a lack of attention and respect from Nicholas, while Nicholas believed that Isabella had exaggerated the problems. On October 5, 2017, on the riverbank in the suburbs of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, USA, a horrific incident occurred. Law enforcement officers discovered the body of a man wrapped in a tarp and tightly bound with a belt on both sides. The body was found at the bottom of a trash bin behind a local supermarket. The autopsy results revealed that the victim had suffered multiple severe blows and stab wounds. Apparently, the man had been severely beaten for an extended period. As a result, his jaw and teeth were broken, with some fragments having penetrated his respiratory tract. Most of the bones in his face and head were fractured. There were 6 blunt force injuries on his skull. In addition, he had 6 stab wounds in his neck, 7 in his throat, and several in his upper chest. The injuries on the victim's body were so severe that some areas of flesh had been cut away. The medical examiner determined the cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, substantial blood loss, and asphyxiation. The victim was identified as Nicholas Wilcox, 39, from Putnam, Connecticut, and this was confirmed by his brother. Several people have come under suspicion in the investigation into Nicholas' death, including his girlfriend, Isabella Tagliarini, and her ex-boyfriend, Eric Robinson. Both were Nicholas' neighbors in the duplex apartment where he had moved. The house was designed for 2 families, with separate living spaces, each with its own yard and entrance, a common type of property in Florida. Eric, the first tenant, sublet the vacant units, and Isabella, 38, was the first person he invited. She was from Brazil, where she worked as a flight attendant for a national airline. In 2010, she divorced and immigrated to the United States with her children. She successfully married an American, which helped her obtain her dream green card. However, that marriage lasted only until 2016, as their feelings gradually faded, leading to their separation. That same year, she began dating Eric. Her new partner was from a small town in Massachusetts, had never been married, and had no children. Their romantic relationship developed quickly, although it was occasionally tumultuous. Isabella and Eric led a passionate but complicated relationship. However, Eric often changed the way he expressed his feelings, sometimes cheerful and friendly, but at other times dark and aggressive. Due to this erratic behavior, they broke up and reconciled many times. In June 2017, shortly before Nicholas moved in, they had separated again. Nicholas had known the couple for about 6 months and maintained contact with them. When he mentioned wanting to save on rent, Eric offered him to move in and share the expenses. Initially, the 3 people had a wonderful relationship. They respected each other's personal space yet often spent time together. However, over time, problems began to arise. It turned out that Eric was using and possessing illegal substances, which explained his erratic behavior and mood swings. On August 23, 2017, Eric was arrested for possession and use of a controlled substance. He had reconciled with Isabella shortly before and was actually in a relationship with her at the time of his arrest. At the time, Nicholas was living with them under the same roof. After Eric was arrested, Nicholas and Isabella had no idea when he would be released or what their future would hold. They could be evicted at any moment, so they threw themselves into jobs to provide a steady source of income. Luckily for Nicholas, there were plenty of jobs, but not for Isabella. She struggled to find suitable work, so she started helping her neighbor in the construction industry. On October 5, 2017, a man called the local police. In the call, he introduced himself as Isabella's ex-boyfriend and asked the police to contact her, as she had information about a recent case. Although the call lacked specific details, the police immediately responded and called Isabella. From the way she spoke, it was clear that she was in a state of agitation. When asked by the police what had happened, she replied that everything was fine. The only thing that was worrying her at the time was an argument with her lover. She explained that he had left her and gone in an unknown direction. However, when the police mentioned the call from her ex-boyfriend, her tone immediately changed. She began to cry and confessed that her lover was not going anywhere, he was dead. She also added that she knew where the body was and was willing to show it to the police. Law enforcement arrived at the house to which Isabella had provided an address. The house had boarded up windows and doors, apparently in preparation for an upcoming storm. Inside, there was a strong smell of cleaning products and paint, indicating that the place had been recently cleaned. In one of the bedrooms, detectives noticed that the walls and floors had been hastily and roughly painted. This might have been done to hide something rather than for routine renovations. Their suspicions were confirmed when they discovered hydrogen peroxide containers and small bloodstains on the bedding and nightstands. It was clear that someone had replaced the old mattress and tried to clean the area, but the blood was still evident everywhere. Police suspected that this was the scene of a violent crime that Isabella had attempted to clean up but was too late to fully erase. During the conversation, she explained that she had been under the influence of sedatives during the phone call, which accounted for her unusual behavior. The mentally unstable woman was taken to the police station. At this point, the police contacted her ex-boyfriend, who provided some information about the incident. According to him, she had called him and told him about the case. According to her first testimony, around 2 a.m. on October 5, a man had come to the duplex, then found Nicholas and her sleeping. He became angry when he saw Nicholas in the bedroom. He woke Isabella by holding a knife to her neck to prevent her from screaming. At that time, she saw Nicholas lying next to her, apparently having difficulty breathing. However, masked man would not let her see any further and pushed her out of the room. Masked man then used brass knuckles and a baseball bat to beat the defenseless Nicholas. After the beating, masked man wrapped the body in a tarp and secured it with a belt. Under threat from masked man, she helped him dispose of the body. Detectives did not understand why Isabella called her ex-boyfriend instead of calling the police. Isabella explained that she felt confused and needed support and advice. According to her, the criminal had asked her to clean up and erase all traces. The criminal then returned the phone he had taken earlier and left. Isabella's confession raised suspicions and needed to be re-examined. In addition, injuries such as bruises and scratches on Isabella's body, which she claimed were caused by masked man after Nicholas' death, were also noted. Officers began their investigation by searching for Eric. They located his hiding place. Medical examiners and forensic pathologists were also present at the scene to conduct necessary investigations. He was released from prison on October 3 and is currently living at a different address. During this time, he met and began living with a new woman named Merida. On the night of October 5, Merida stated that her boyfriend received a phone call and immediately left. He returned home around 5 a.m., quickly packed his belongings, and left without explaining why. When asked if she noticed any blood on her boyfriend's clothing, Merida said she did not see anything suspicious. Eric was found around 8 p.m., 4 miles from the home. He refused to cooperate with the investigation and was subsequently detained for further questioning. During the interrogation, Eric provided an account that differed from Isabella's version of events. According to Eric, Isabella contacted him on the night of October 5th, even though she had been forbidden from contacting him immediately after his arrest. Eric also claimed that Isabella admitted to him that she had attacked Nicholas while under the influence of drugs, leading to Nicholas's death. After regaining consciousness, Isabella realized she could not solve the problem on her own and asked for help. In return, Isabella promised Eric that they would get back together and restart their relationship. Because Eric still had strong feelings for her, he agreed to these terms. The investigation revealed that Isabella is not as innocent as previously believed. In fact, she has come to the attention of police on several occasions in the past. On September 22, Nicholas and Isabella had a heated argument that extended beyond their room. Under the influence of Xanax and other drugs, Isabella became upset and destroyed some of Nicholas's belongings. Worse, she also damaged Nicholas's car. As a result, Nicholas felt compelled to contact the police regarding this incident. Isabella had an explosive personality and a hot temper, which made Nicholas fear for his life. However, they reconciled the next morning, and Nicholas withdrew the complaint. Investigators then spoke with Eric, who described Isabella as having an explosive personality and a hot temper. He also noted that Nicholas had warned her during their argument, threatening to contact immigration services if such incidents occurred again. Nicholas warned her that he would make a damaging remark that could severely affect her future. For Isabella, the opportunity to live in the United States was extremely important, so the fear of deportation was terrifying. It is possible that during another argument, Isabella might react violently and feel threatened. Her desire to remain in the United States may have motivated the crime. Detectives did not want to rely solely on existing statements. So they began interviewing people close to those involved. A key witness was Nicholas and Isabella's neighbor. The neighbor's window overlooked the courtyard of the duplex. Neighbors testified that they saw Eric arrive in his car on the night of the incident. Eric then took some tools and trash bags before driving away. The investigation into the case against Isabella yielded substantial evidence. She was summoned for questioning again on October 11th. At that time, she had not been arrested and had voluntarily come to the police station. Based on video surveillance footage, detectives determined that on that fateful night, she personally transported Nicholas's body and disposed of it in the trash. Throughout the process, she acted calmly and methodically, showing no signs of fear or agitation. She met Eric that night but remained relaxed and friendly. During further questioning, Isabella's story changed. Isabella claimed that Eric had threatened to kill her and her children, saying that she was forced to kill Nicholas. However, investigators remained cautious in their conclusions. They found the histories of both Eric and Isabella suspicious. Eric had a troubled past with the law, having come to the attention of the police in 2001 primarily for drug possession and distribution. At the same time, Isabella had many reasons to be concerned about him. In August 2016, he committed aggravated assault against a woman. In June 2017, he was arrested for strangulation and for drug possession that same year. Neighbors reported that they feared him and tried to stay away due to his aggressive and unstable behavior. The next interview with Isabella took place on October 14th. Although she claimed not to have touched Nicholas, experts found traces of her DNA on the man's body, which contradicted her testimony. According to the investigation, Isabella was involved in the violence against Nicholas, at least in the handling of the body and the destruction of evidence. However, no evidence was found to establish any specific crime. During the investigation, Isabella was briefly detained before being released and awaiting trial. People were eagerly anticipating the trial's commencement. However, Due to various obstacles and delays, the trial did not take place until 5 years later. During the time, the prosecution clearly formulated its evidence and tactics, while the defense carefully reviewed all the gathered information. In addition, another important piece of evidence was discovered. The prosecution recovered Eric's deleted social media account, which he had used to discuss the crime against Nicholas. During these years, Isabella pleaded guilty to the prosecution, admitting to a lesser crime in exchange for a lighter sentence. She agreed to testify against Eric. On April 10, 2023, the trial of Eric finally took place. The prosecution argued that Eric was solely responsible for the crime against Nicholas. Isabella's role was not considered that of an accomplice but rather as a witness who had tampered with evidence and helped erase evidence, which is also punishable by criminal penalties. During the trial, Eric was charged with attempted murder. Despite Torini's testimony being contradictory and inconsistent, her lawyer maintained her innocence. During the proceedings, the prosecution focused on witness testimony describing Eric's unusual behavior on the night of the murder. To avoid being monitored via GPS, Eric used his new girlfriend's car, which did not have a satellite tracking system, and he also left his cell phone at home. Other details have emerged in this case. After the incident, Isabella and Eric had a private meeting in which Isabella explained that she was under the influence of a powerful sedative and feared for her life. After reviewing the evidence, it became clear that jealousy led to Nicholas's brutal and senseless murder. Although Isabella claimed she had ended the relationship, Eric still considered her his girlfriend. After his release, the defendant returned home, but the changes that had occurred during that time had made him even angrier and more hateful. During this period, he plotted revenge against his rival. He carried out a cold-blooded attack when the couple was most vulnerable while they were sleeping. His first attack resulted in the death of Nicholas. He then attempted to destroy the evidence by scattering it in various locations. The murder weapon was found in a dumpster, and Nicholas's body was wrapped in a tarp and hidden in a trash can. Isabella then painted over the blood splattered on the wall and cleaned up the area. Throughout these actions, Eric was in contact with Isabella and directed her actions. Ultimately, Eric, 51, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for second-degree murder. Isabella was convicted of assisting a criminal, but threats and coercion were considered mitigating factors, so she received a suspended sentence until 2026. It is noteworthy that Isabella was willing to do anything to obtain U.S. citizenship. It was revealed that 10 days after Eric was detained, he and Isabella signed another pledge in which Eric promised to marry Isabella. But he did not fulfill that promise. She is preparing to marry him right after he resolves his relationship with her ex. It seems that she does not care much about whom she marries, as long as she can maintain her U.S. citizenship. Isabella's main purpose in having relationships with men is to use them for her own benefit. In many ways, these men are all predisposed to marry. It is clear that U.S. citizenship is her top concern, even if it comes at a high price. Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Amber Belkin. Amber was born on December 6, 1981, in San Antonio. An only child, her parents said she was very energetic, ambitious, and responsible. Before her disappearance, Amber had worked as a manager at a video game store for nearly 3 years. On January 29, she was scheduled to work an extra shift. Although the store opened at 10 a.m. to welcome customers, Amber usually arrived around 9 a.m. to prepare for the workday. As part of her morning routine, she would take the previous day's earnings from the safe and deposit them at a nearby bank to minimize the store's cash holdings. On a typical day in January, Amber, as usual, arrived at work around 9 a.m. The store where she worked was part of a large international chain. However, that day, Amber did not open the store by 10 a.m. Around noon, The regional manager contacted the manager of another store in San Antonio and asked him to drive over and find out why Amber had not deposited the money and the store was not open yet. Amber also did not answer phone calls, which raised suspicion and concern. Mariano Rivera was the employee who went to check on Amber. When he arrived, he noticed a white car that looked like Amber's. However, the store entrance was locked, and when he looked through the glass door, he saw no one inside. Mariano knocked on the door several times but received no response, so he left. 2 hours later, he returned to check the store again. This time, through the window, he saw Amber's assistant, Brandon. Mariano knocked and Brandon let him in. Mariano asked Brandon if he had seen Amber, but Brandon said no. Brandon explained that he had just arrived and noticed something unusual in the store. There were papers and CDs scattered on the floor, along with some money. Mariano entered the back room and made a horrifying discovery. Amber's body was lying on the floor, face down, with a plastic bag covering her head. Mariano quickly called 911. And the police arrived at the scene and cordoned off the area. Forensic experts later determined that her cause of death was strangulation. Police discovered that Amber had not deposited any money into the bank that day. The store's safe was also found empty, indicating that a robbery had taken place. It appeared that the robbers had come across Amber and decided to kill her to prevent her from being a witness. After reviewing Amber's schedule, police determined that the crime occurred between 9 and 10 a.m. Unfortunately, the lack of surveillance cameras at the store hampered their investigation. To proceed, they interviewed the first people to discover the body, Mariano Rivera and Brandon Beal. The couple described their appearance and the circumstances surrounding their discovery. Store management reported that approximately $2,000 was missing from the safe, along with several video game CDs and 3 to 4 PlayStation consoles. The total loss was in excess of $6,000. Police interviewed employees of nearby businesses but were unable to gather any useful information as no one reported seeing or hearing anything suspicious. As police continued to process the crime scene, news spread throughout San Antonio, drawing a large crowd of media representatives to the store's parking lot. Amber's father, Randy Belkin, first heard about the incident on the news, and when he saw the address of the store where the crime took place, he immediately rushed to the scene. When he arrived, he spoke to a police officer who gave him the heartbreaking news that the victim was his daughter, Amber. He was shocked to hear this information. A short time later, Amber's mother, Lelia, also arrived at the store. She could see the pain in her husband's eyes and instinctively knew what had happened. Their only child was gone. When the police examined the crime scene, they came to a number of conclusions. The perpetrators appeared to have left through the back door, which explained why no one had seen them. It was clear that the perpetrators knew the store's schedule in advance, including the time the money was transferred to the bank, between 9 and 10 a.m. Furthermore, they knew that the store did not have surveillance cameras. This suggests that the perpetrator is likely a current or former employee, as this information is known only within the company. Brandon Beal, Amber's assistant, was the first person to be implicated in the crime. He was familiar with the layout of the store and went inside when a manager from another location came to check on Amber. When he arrived at work, Brandon found the store closed despite it being past its opening hours. He used a key to unlock the door, entered, and locked it. He saw signs of a struggle inside, but for some reason, he did not go into the back room to see if Amber was there and if she was okay. Police spoke with company management and discovered that Amber, the store manager, had expressed dissatisfaction with Brandon's performance and wanted him fired. Amber had told her mother about his bad temper and failure to perform his duties. However, police still need to determine whether Amber's negative opinion of Brandon was enough to make him commit the crime. After obtaining a warrant, officers searched Brandon's car and home, looking for the stolen CDs and PlayStation. However, they did not find any stolen items. Brandon told police that he arrived at the store around 2 p.m. and was surprised to find it closed. He used his keys to enter, assuming Amber was not there, and found the mess, leading him to believe the store had been robbed. A manager from another location arrived shortly afterward. Brandon admitted to having frequent disagreements with Amber but insisted he was unaware of her plans to fire him. He had a solid alibi for the time of the crime, confirmed by his girlfriend and parents, and passed a lie detector test, ultimately eliminating him as a suspect. 4 weeks have passed since Amber's death, but the police investigation remains stalled, with no new leads to pursue. There are growing concerns that the case may never be solved. Desperate for a breakthrough, Amber's parents have made a public appeal through the media, asking anyone with information about the case to come forward. A $100,000 reward has been offered for any information leading to an arrest, with $95,000 of that offered by Amber's company. Flyers with Amber's picture have been distributed throughout San Antonio. Yet despite all this, no progress has been made for the next 7 months, until one day a police station receives a crucial call. A man calling himself Joe contacts the police handling Amber's case and reveals that he knows who is responsible for her death. Joe alleged that Giovanni Rivera, 22, was the one who strangled Amber. When asked by police why, Joe explained that he, Giovanni, and Amber had previously worked for the same company. Joe added that on the day of the incident, Giovanni had called him to propose a robbery, targeting the specific store where Amber worked. This was no random choice, as Giovanni knew the store did not have surveillance cameras. The police asked Joe if he accepted Giovanni's offer and participated in the robbery, to which Joe replied no. If everything said was true, then the police's initial assumption that the crime was committed by someone very familiar with the store's routine was correct. The police asked Joe to come to the police station and give a formal statement. Initially, he refused. But perhaps understanding that the police would soon find him, Joe went to the police station 2 days later. Joe explained that Giovanni had initially mentioned his plan to rob a store. According to Joe, Giovanni never said that he would harm Amber, but about a month after her death and after the case had been widely publicized in the media, Giovanni confessed that Amber's death was his doing. Joe said that he did not call the police immediately because he feared for his safety. And his guilt eventually overcame his fear, prompting him to contact the police. Although Joe's testimony was not enough to warrant an arrest warrant for Giovanni Rivera, it did prompt the police to summon him to the police station for further questioning. It should be noted that Giovanni Rivera and Mariano Rivera, the manager who discovered the body, were not related, they only had the same name. During his conversation with the police, Giovanni accused Joe of lying and denied any involvement in the crime. He then refused to answer further questions, forcing the police to release him. While the police were thinking about how they could bring him to justice, Giovanni moved to Laredo, Texas, with his family. Due to insufficient evidence, the police were unable to act and the case remained stalled for months. A crucial turning point in the case came unexpectedly. In June 2008, nearly a year and a half after Amber's death, Giovanni's wife, Veronica, contacted the police. She reported that Giovanni had attacked her, threatened her and their children with a gun, and also revealed to the police that Giovanni was responsible for Amber Belkin's murder. The police in charge of the case traveled to Laredo to interview Veronica in person. During their meeting, she expressed regret for marrying Giovanni, saying that she had become pregnant with him while still in school, and that her family had pressured them to marry. However, after the wedding, Giovanni's behavior changed dramatically, revealing a controlling and domineering personality. According to Veronica, he often forced sex on her, even tying her up with duct tape if she refused him. Veronica testified that when Giovanni was first called to the police station, He returned home looking very upset and quickly informed her that they needed to move to Laredo immediately. They packed their belongings and left San Antonio that same day. Veronica concluded that if her husband was innocent, there would be no reason for them to move. At one point, Veronica mustered up the courage to confront Giovanni about his involvement in Amber's death. Giovanni admitted to killing Amber. Veronica was shocked and asked why he did it. Giovanni replied that he did it because their family desperately needed money to pay rent. Veronica filed for divorce, which caused Giovanni to become violent. He drove her to a secluded location, where he pulled out a pistol and ordered her into the back seat of the car. He then followed her, threatening her and forcing her to comply with his demands. Giovanni then gave Veronica a gun and instructed her to shoot him. When she refused, he retaliated by threatening her, her children and her family. Veronica begged him to think about what would happen to their children if they were left without parents. This appeal seemed to work, and they returned home that night. However, the next morning, Giovanni declared that he was abandoning his family. As he drove away, Veronica immediately called the police and told them about her husband's confession. After Giovanni's wife joined Joe, another witness, to testify against him, the police obtained an arrest warrant. However, Giovanni escaped by crossing the U.S.-Mexico border and hiding in Mexico. It took 6 weeks for the police to track him down and arrest him at a relative's house. The Mexican police agreed to extradite him to the United States only on the condition that prosecutors drop the death penalty against him. These conditions were agreed upon, and when all the documents were prepared, Giovanni Rivera was handed over to the U.S. police. On August 7, 2008, Giovanni was questioned. In contrast to the previous conversation of the police, his wife's statement was brought up. When informed of this, he confessed everything. He said that as soon as Amber opened the door of the store, he followed her, wearing gloves and a mask. He was surprised when Amber recognized him. He told her that he was having financial problems and that he needed money, and he made her open the safe. A struggle broke out as Amber tried to grab the phone, prompting him to bind her with duct tape. When she panicked and began screaming, he covered her mouth with his hand, ordering her to be quiet. Amber tried to escape, but he reached a point where he felt he could no longer turn back. In a desperate move, he grabbed a nearby plastic bag and blocked her airway, eventually stopping her from breathing. After she became unresponsive, he took the store's money, several CDs, and several PlayStation consoles before fleeing in his car, which was parked behind the store. Giovanni's attorney offered a plea deal. The district attorney's office accepted the deal, which did not include a life sentence without parole, but was considered the best outcome for Amber's family given the risks and uncertainties of a jury trial and the possibility of appeal. As a result of this agreement, in April 2010, Giovanni Rivera was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. Regarding the $100,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the perpetrator, the government has not disclosed whether the money has been paid to anyone. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak. Matthew Patrick Matt Podolak, born June 10, 1975, in Ohio, USA, to Patricia Romano and Leonard Podak. In high school, Matthew was a member of the hockey team. After graduating, he enlisted in the U.S. Navy and later worked at Phoenix Industrial Finishing, a company owned by his uncle. Although this provided opportunities for advancement, but Matthew encountered difficulty to connect with his co-workers, who may have felt jealous of his privileged position. His sister, Chrissy Duca, attributed the tension was partly due to rumors of a possible promotion, which his colleagues believed he did not deserve. Outside of work, Matthew was an outdoors enthusiast who enjoyed activities such as boating, camping, and hunting. He also played softball and hockey during his free time. In 2003, Matthew met Holly McFeature, and they began dating shortly after, eventually they moving in together in Cleveland. The relationship marked a new chapter in Matthew's life. Friends said that he was eager to settle down and start a family. Matthew and Holly had 2 children together, Samantha and Josh, and also raised Holly's child from a previous relationship as part of their family. Matthew's mother, Patricia, said he loved Holly very much, and his feelings for her were sincere. Matthew's life underwent a drastic change when he transformed from a bachelor to a father of 3 in a short period. Initially, his relationship with Holly was filled with love and mutual understanding. However, by 2005, their romance had turned sour, becoming increasingly argumentative and strained. On multiple occasions, Matthew would leave home after a fight with Holly and spend the night with a friend. Friends, who had grown concerned about the relationship, advised Matthew to end things with Holly, citing her selfish behavior as a major red flag. Despite their warnings, Matthew refused to listen and continually returned to Holly. Furthermore, Matthew had taken out a life insurance policy that named Holly as the beneficiary. Despite the advice of friends to remove her from the policy, Matthew did not make any changes. During this time, Matthew's behavior was erratic, which ranged from extreme happiness to intense anger, upset, and fear. According to Matthew's best friend, Russell, he had become depressed during this time. However, he seemed overly optimistic about his future, particularly when it came to raising his 3 children, a prospect that filled him with both hope for the future. Russell advised Matthew to take precautions and remove the guns from their home due to the volatile situation they were in. After the hockey season ended in 2006, he started online gambling, which resulted in him losing a lot of money. His family and friends noticed that he was struggling with depression and advised him to see a doctor. He followed their advice and was prescribed antidepressants. By the spring of 2006, Matthew's health started to deteriorate. His condition worsened by Memorial Day weekend, causing Russell to become extremely concerned about Matthew's physical well-being. Around that time, Russell had asked him for help transferring a motor from one boat to another. However, he was no longer the strong person he once was, experiencing severe back pain and complaining of excessive sweating and a lack of strength. Russell urged Matthew to see a doctor and recommended Dr. Thomas Mandat. He scheduled an appointment with Dr. Mandat for July 26, 2006. On the day of the appointment, he called Russell to ask for directions to the doctor's office. During their conversation, Russell could hear Holly arguing with Matthew in the background. Matthew visited the doctor, complaining of back pain. After examining him, Dr. Mandat diagnosed him with kidney stones and prescribed medication to help pass the stones and alleviate the associated pain. In a phone call to his father on the afternoon of July 30th, Matthew shared his excitement about buying a new fishing rod for his daughter. He was looking forward to taking her fishing, hoping they could go together soon, along with his father. Matthew's anticipation for their upcoming family outing were evident in the conversation with his father. On the evening of the same day, Matthew attended a party with Russell. He found Matthew's health condition alarming. Matthew had gained significant weight, was sweating excessively, and struggled to walk. Matthew also complained of severe back pain. Later that evening, Matthew's condition worsened, and Holly became concerned. She called 911 and then contacted Matthew's father, informing him that something was wrong with his son. Matthew's father had a brief phone conversation with him and found he to be confused and very distressed. Matthew was rushed to the emergency room at Parma General Hospital, where doctors suspected he was experiencing organ failure. Tests revealed that Matthew's kidneys had failed, and he was suffering from metabolic acidosis, a condition where the blood becomes highly acidic. Dr. Mandat, an emergency room doctor, suspected that Matthew had ingested a toxic substance, such as methanol or antifreeze. When questioned, Holly denied the possibility that Matthew had swallowed antifreeze or medical alcohol, asserting that he had not consumed anything that could have caused harm. On July 31, 2006, Matthew passed away at the hospital due to kidney failure. According to Dr. Mandat's testimony, Matthew's death was not caused by respiratory problems, as metabolic acidosis typically is. Instead, Dr. Mandat explained that ethylene glycol can also cause this condition. After Matthew's death, his family and friends were overcome with grief, but Holly seemed unaffected. In the days that followed, her friend Rebecca Vega tried to offer support and accompanied her to the funeral home. However, Vega noticed that Holly did not feel sad at all. At the wake, Matthew's father had to ask Holly to join the family in the main room to receive visitors, and even then, she appeared to be unfeeling and indifferent. Russell recalled that Holly acted like it was a normal gathering, showing no signs of grief. The day after Matthew's death was particularly telling. Holly used Matthew's bank card to withdraw money from an ATM and wrote checks in his name, draining his bank account. When Matthew's mother reported Holly's suspicious behavior to the police, Holly was arrested and charged with 2 counts of forgery. She later agreed to restitution and was placed on probation for 1 year. Holly was the beneficiary of Matthew's life insurance policy, although the policy was relatively small, and she received only $10,000 after his death. 2 weeks later, her friend Rebecca visited Holly and noticed various cleaning supplies, including what appeared to be solvents, left out in the open. Since there were small children living in the house, Rebecca found this absurd and asked Holly about it. She calmly explained that one of the items was antifreeze, which Matthew used to winterize his boat. However, Russell disagreed with this and stated that Matthew's boat had not been operational since its engine broke down in 2004 or 2005. Holly's demeanor after Matthew's death raised concerns with others. For example, she had an intimate relationship with Michael Jaima, a Cleveland police officer, who would often visit her home for coffee. Michael had known Holly since 2002. One day, Michael called Holly to ask if he should come to her house at this time. She replied that there was no need to worry about it anymore, because Matthew died last week, without showing any emotion. She attributed Matthew's death to kidney issues and pain from playing hockey, but her tone came across as careless and heartless. Following Matthew's death, his belongings were removed from the house. Holly asked a friend to erase some content from Matthew's computer and then cut up his clothes to make a quilt. 6 weeks after Matthew's passing, Holly began dating Charles Lipham, a Cleveland police officer. Initially, she told Charles that Matthew had died from kidney failure. However, after the autopsy report was released in January 2007, she changed her story. The autopsy revealed that Matthew had an unusually large amount of ethylene glycol in his system, the key ingredient in antifreeze. Later, Holly told Charles that Matthew might have intentionally taken something to end his life. The autopsy report confirmed that Matthew died from chronic ethylene glycol intoxication, but the coroner was unable to determine how or why he ingested the substance. It's worth noting that Holly told Charles that she didn't know what antifreeze was. Holly also provided conflicting explanations for Matthew's death, telling friend Sean Walsh that Matthew had died in an industrial accident. She also said that one of his co-workers might have poisoned him out of envy due to his connection to the boss. However, Matthew's family suspects that the truth behind his death may have been caused by someone close to him. This skepticism is partly due to Holly's indifferent attitude at the funeral, which contrasted with claims from Holly's sister that she had been crying in the car beforehand. During the investigation, detectives discovered 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of the house Holly had relocated from, which they took into evidence in 2007. The findings were recorded in the police report. Later in 2007, after parting ways with Charles, Holly met Jameson Kennedy while working at a bar. As they started dating, Holly chose not to share any details about Matthew's death with Jameson. However, Jameson has a troubled past, with multiple convictions and struggles with addiction. One evening in September 2008, Holly and Jameson were together, consuming alcohol, and Take Action intimate. According to Jameson, Holly became emotional, she began crying, and confided in him about Matthew's death. She expressed her desire to leave Cleveland and put the past behind her. Holly confessed to putting something in Matthew's drinks that made him ill and ultimately led to his death. However, Jameson was unsure if she was telling the truth. Seeking advice, Jameson met with his friend Santiago Feliciano, a lawyer, and shared Holly's confession with him. Santiago recommended that Jameson report this information to the authorities if he believed it to be true. Jameson then called Holly to discuss her earlier confession, unaware that their conversation was being recorded. He hoped she will turn herself in and admit that she is the one who caused Matthew's death. Instead, Holly vehemently denied ever harming Matthew, claiming Jameson was misinterpreting her. The conversation between Holly and Jameson caused a rift in their relationship. Jameson began to suspect that Holly was cheating on him. On November 8, 2008, Jameson went to her house to confront her. Feeling threatened, Holly called the police. When the officers arrived, Jameson attacked them and was subsequently arrested and charged with assault. Jameson was sentenced to 10 years in prison after being found guilty of assaulting officers. Following his arrest, he informed the police about a confession he'd have heard from Holly, reportedly linking her to the death of Matthew. This added to the evidence of Holly's involvement in Matthew's death. The police initially investigated the death in 2007 after the autopsy report was released, but the case stalled for many years because they initially did not consider it an intentional act. To re-examine the case, it is essential to look at the autopsy report. Dr. Galita, an experienced forensic pathologist and medical examiner, conducted the autopsy. Then, Dr. Galita and County Coroner Dr. Elizabeth Balch released their autopsy report in January 2007. The report determined Matthew's death was caused by chronic ethylene glycol poisoning, although the circumstances surrounding it were unclear. When Matthew ingested ethylene glycol, it entered his bloodstream and was quickly broken down by his liver using an enzyme called alcohol dehydrogenase. This process converted the ethylene glycol into oxalate, which then combined with calcium to form sharp calcium oxalate crystals. A large number of these crystals accumulated in Pax's kidneys, causing a blockage that disrupted their function. According to Dr. Galita, the severe pain Matthew experienced in his side starting on May 20, 2006, was likely caused by the crystals in his kidneys. When Dr. Galita examined Matthew's kidneys, he found two significant things. In addition to kidney damage, there are signs that the kidneys are beginning to heal. Further examination revealed the emergence of the crystals in Matthew's heart and brain, as well as severe acute myocarditis. Myocarditis is an acute inflammation of the heart muscle. The doctor stated that Matthew's myocarditis could not have been caused by an ingestion of ethylene glycol. Instead, the inflammation would have taken at least 3 weeks to develop. He also ruled out a heart attack as the cause of death. In conclusion, Dr. Galita determined that Matthew's death was the result of long-term ethylene glycol poisoning. He believed a series of but acute toxicity episodes, occurring over at least a 3-month period, ultimately led to his death. Matthew often drank iced tea at work, particularly raspberry flavor. He usually brought it in a thermos or the container. A Matthew's friend, Michael Mall, testified that Holly frequently brought Matthew lunch at work. His meal often came with a half or whole gallon container of iced tea. The police found 2 bottles of antifreeze in the garage of Holly's former home in August 2007. The bottles, one a Peak brand and the other a Saturn brand, were discovered after she had moved out. 3 years after Matthew's autopsy results were released, an report amendment was made to the report in 2010. The revised report, signed by County Coroner Dr. Frank Miller, confirmed that Matthew died from poisoning by ethylene glycol, a toxin found in antifreeze, in long term, and deemed the death a homicide. 6 years after Matthew's death, the authorities decided it was time to arrest Holly. She was formally charged in July of that year with the serious offense of depriving Matthew of his life. Holly's charges came as no surprise to Matthew's family. According to his older brother, Mark, they suspected Holly's involvement in his younger brother's death all along. Mark stated that Holly's behavior around the time of the death raised suspicions, saying she just wasn't acting like somebody who was losing a loved one. Authorities suspected that Holly had been secretly poisoning Matthew by adding antifreeze to his cold raspberry tea for several weeks or even months. In 2013, she went to court, pleading not guilty to the charges. However, there was no direct evidence, only indirect indications of her guilt. To prove their case, the prosecution called 15 witnesses to testify. These witnesses included Matthew's family and friends, Dr. Galita, who conducted the autopsy, Dr. Thomas Mandat, who was Matthew's doctor, and several police officers who investigated the case. Witnesses focused on several key points, including Holly's suspicious actions, a phone call Matthew made before visiting the doctor, and the fact that Matthew had not owned a functioning boat since 2004. Which meant he had no use for antifreeze. Holly's defense team countered by stating that Matthew's family and friends had prejudged her as guilty and then pressured law enforcement to bring charges against her following Matthew's death. The prosecution's strongest testimony came from Dr. Galita, the medical examiner in charge of performing the autopsy. Dr. Galita provided a detailed explanation for his conclusion that Matthew was the victim of chronic poisoning over a period of 3 months. He arrived at this conclusion because on the emergence of crystals in Matthew's kidneys and myocarditis, a type of inflammation of the heart muscle that can be caused by exposure to ethylene glycol. After ruling out causes other of myocarditis, such as infection, Dr. Galita emphasized that Matthew's condition could not have been the result of a single, short-term exposure to ethylene glycol. Dr. Galita also clarified why the initial autopsy report, completed in 2007, did not indicate that Matthew's death was intentional. He explained that, at the time, the coroner's office did not have enough information to make this determination, which led to the manner of death being listed as undetermined. However, after further investigation, the report was revised. The testimony of other witnesses supported Dr. Galita's findings. Matthew's friends reported that his health began to decline in the spring of 2006, which was confirmed by his diagnosis of kidney stones in July 2006. The friends also described a volatile relationship between Matthew and Holly, stating that Matthew seemed fearful and had removed his firearms from the home at the advice of a friend. Holly's lawyers claimed that their client was not involved in Matthew's death, suggesting instead that Matthew's depression led him to end his life. According to the defense, Matthew was struggling with losses from online gambling, work-related issues, and difficulties communicating with his child, ultimately leading him to deliberately ingest a lethal dose of antifreeze. The defense argued that Matthew died from a single dose of antifreeze rather than from prolonged exposure over several weeks or months. In support of this theory, they brought Dr. Robert Lux to testify in court, the coroner from El Paso County, Colorado. Dr. Lux testified that Matthew's death was a result of acute poisoning due to a single ingestion of ethylene glycol, indicating a possible suicidal intent. He disputed Dr. Galita's diagnosis of myocarditis and instead believed Matthew had suffered a heart attack. Furthermore, Dr. Lux explained that myocarditis can occur independently of ethylene glycol poisoning and that flank pain is not typically a symptom of ethylene glycol poisoning. He said that there was no connection between kidney stones and ethylene glycol poisoning, a relevant detail in the case. Several key witnesses testified during the trial. One notable witness was Jameson Kennedy, a felon who had been serving a 10-year sentence for assaulting police officers. Jameson claimed that Holly had confessed to him that she had mixed something into Matthew's drinks. However, Holly denied ever making such a statement. Holly argued that Jameson's testimony was motivated by a desire for leniency in his own case or revenge against her. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury delivered a guilty verdict on all counts. On August 28, 2013, the court sentenced Holly McFeature to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years.